skip me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The time is 5:31 p.m. on January 16th, 2019, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is now called to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, please call the roll.
That was loud. Ms. Alicia. That's you. Marjorie. Say present. Present.
We're calling the roll. Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor.
Present.
Dr. Gasoi.
Present.
Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
Ms. McClay.
Present.
Dr. O'Leary.
Present.
Mr. Parker.
Present.
Ms. Robinson.
Present.
Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Ms. Williams.
Present.
A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will proceed now with the business portion of our meeting. So each year, the State Board must elect a president and vice president to provide leadership for the board. As the longest-serving member of the State Board, by about 10 minutes, it is my distinct honor to serve as the election officer for the role of president. I'm also going to explain the process this evening. We will take one or more nominations. We will ask if there are any other nominations and then close nominations. And then we will give board members up to 3 minutes to speak. Board members do not need to speak. And then we will move to a roll call or acclamation election of the president. Once the president is elected, I will hand over the gavel. So I will now entertain motions for president. Seconds are not needed for nominations. You just, if anyone would like to nominate someone, they just need to say the person's name. I would like to nominate X.
Well, I will say this. I strongly believe and have stressed to my colleagues that consensus for leadership is important. And so for the sake of the board, as well as for the work that we're all going to do for our children, and while I believe a variety of perspectives are represented on this board, and I trust that residents elected truly qualified individuals, and that we're all providing interested in providing every child a quality education. I do believe residents spoke loud and clear with recent elections, and we have a responsibility to lead forward in a way that unifies us around.
Does the gentleman have a nomination? There will be
Yes.
time for speeches after the nominations are finalized.
Oh, okay, for sure. I move to nominate for president Ward 3 Representative Ruth Wattenberg.
Thank you. Ms. Wattenberg, do you accept?
I do.
Thank you. Are there additional nominations for president? Ms. Robinson?
I move to nominate Ward 7 Representative Karen Williams for president.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you. Are there additional nominations for president? Hearing none, the executive director will call the roll.
The motion is on election of the president of the State Board of Education. Ms. Robinson.
State the name of the person that you would like to
Karen
vote for.
Williams.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Ms. Alicia.
Karen Williams.
Ms. McClay.
Karen Williams.
Dr. Gasoi.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Mr. Jacobson.
Karen Williams.
Ms. Wattenberg. Dr. O'Leary.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Mr. Parker.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Dr. Sutter.
Karen Williams.
Mr. Batchelor.
Ruth Wattenberg.
Ms. Williams.
Myself.
Ruth Wattenberg is elected president of the State Board of Education.
Congratulations, Ms. Wattenberg. can, but say it from this chair.
Students get to vote, but it doesn't count. She was really nervous.
So are these notes for me? Well, let me just say thank you very, very much to the members for this vote of confidence. I do want to say I'm excited. I think we have a lot to do. I agree with Zachary that the voters sent a message, but we certainly want to work with everybody. We have great people on the board. We had great people on the board. We have terrific people that were just elected, and I think we're going to have a great term, and thank you very much. Okay, and I want to thank Karen and Jack so much for their leadership for the past few years, a point that I made very strongly last week, and I want to reiterate now. And I think that later we're going to have some bylaw amendments that will try to institutionalize bringing in the institutional leadership of our officers emeritus. So with that, I will now entertain nominations for vice president.
I would like to nominate Jack Jacobson as vice president.
Thank you, I accept.
Madam President, I move to nominate Markus Batchelor for vice president.
Thank you. I accept. Thank you, Ms. Sutter.
Are there additional nominations? And I just want to thank our very effective executive director that I have good notes for this very challenging part. Okay.
Madam President,
Yes.
may I have a moment? In the interest of collegiality and comedy, I would withdraw my name from nomination, but thank my colleague for putting my name forward.
Fine, thank you for that. So do we?
Sorry, so you can skip to this part and just say all in favor of Markus and his ward.
Okay, all in favor of Markus Batchelor from Ward 8 for the position of vice president, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
By acclamation. Okay, congratulations. Vice President Markus Batchelor.
Are you leaving?
And I'm going to send you a set of videos of the Oh, thank you. Okay, I hope everybody will bear with me as I do my maiden voyage of trying to follow all of this, but I will do my best, and John Paul has already proved his enormous competence in this, so hopefully it will all go smoothly. So, members, we have a draft agenda before us. Without objection, I would like unanimous consent to consider the items under number 9 on a consent agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Parker has an amendment.
Oh,
Mr. Parker?
Madam President, I move to remove bylaws from consent agenda for the purpose of amendment.
is there any objection to that? So moved, so taken. Okay. So where?
So there was a motion on the agenda in a second, so then I move to here.
Okay, so the motion being properly moved to put 2 of those things in the consent agenda, if I'm right, and seconded, I will ask for yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and now we go to the amendment. Opposed, sorry. Okay. The motion is approved. Okay, now we have the minutes from our January 9th working session before us. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay, seeing no changes, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
the motion being properly moved and seconded, I will ask for the yeas and nays. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion is approved. Comments from the President of the DC State Board of Education. Let's see. Good evening. My name is Ruth Wattenberg. I'm the Ward 3 representative and president of the State Board of Ed. This is really great, John Paul. I'm very impressed. On behalf of the members of the DC State Board of Education, I want to welcome all of our guests and our viewing public to our Wednesday, January 16th public meeting. The State Board typically holds its regularly scheduled meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at the Old Council Chambers here at 441 4th Street Northwest. In addition to broadcasting this meeting live via the District Knowledge Network, we are also live streaming via Periscope on Twitter, and the video for the meeting will be posted on our YouTube page once the meeting concludes. Tonight's agenda will include the presentation of some ceremonial resolutions to an outstanding educator and leader, Maisha Riddlesprigger, the 2019 DCPS Principal of the Year. I want to welcome her and her guests to our meeting tonight. Thank you for all that you do for our students. We will also consider a resolution appointing the third Ombudsman for Public Education, Serena Hayes. You'll hear more about Ms. Hayes' experience later in the meeting, but I want to take a moment to say that I'm very impressed with Ms. Hayes, and I would say that anyway. And I'm confident she will be a strong leader for the office. We're also joined tonight by local and national experts on student success. The panel will be focused on identifying the skills and knowledge that our students need to succeed in whatever path they chose in life. It is vital that our graduates are ready, and we are grateful to the panelists for sharing their points of view with us. Before we begin the public testimony, which always comes first, I want to update the public on an item of importance. As you know, we did a study on teacher turnover, which came out in the fall. The State Board staff has worked with others to synthesize the information that we receive from the public, and they've done a great job, and we are going to consider later their report. This is a staff report. It does not in itself obligate the board to implement the recommendations, but it is going to serve as the basis for our thinking going forward, and I'm really thrilled to see the people in the audience who are here to testify on this really important subject. Is she going to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. So our State Superintendent, Hansel Kang, is unable to join us tonight, but her Chief of Staff, Shauna Young, is here. Thank you for joining us, and I think you're going to make a comment.
Hi, thank you so much. On behalf of State Superintendent Kang, who couldn't be here, thank you for, as always, hosting us at the dais. I wanted to thank our past State Board leadership of Karen Williams and Jack Jacobson for your wonderful partnership over the past couple of years, and also acknowledge that we're really looking forward to working with all the past and new board members, and to Markus Batchelor and Ruth Wattenberg in your new leadership roles. So thank you, and we look forward to continuing the productive relationship with OSSE as we move forward to support our kids. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of us, we share that feeling very much. We look forward to it. Public comment time. The State Board welcomes public participation in activities under our authority at every public meeting. We begin with testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. Your comments will become part of the official record. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak at a future public meeting, please contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by calling 202-741-0888. Tonight we have 6 public witnesses. If they have provided written comments for the record, they are available on our website. We will have 2 panels. As I call your name, please come down to the table. So the first table will be Laura Fuchs, Washington Teachers Union, Committee on Political Education Chair. 2, Ben Williams, DC Charter School teacher. And 3, Simona Spicciani, Gerhardt, DCPS teacher. Can I say that she's at Wilson, which is a high school in my ward, and where my son attended. You each have 3 minutes to speak this evening. Please note that you must use your microphone. Your mic is on. You do not need to move it towards you. The light on the table will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, then it will turn yellow for 30 seconds, and then it will turn red after 3 minutes have elapsed. We will begin on your left, my right. Ms. Fuchs.
Hello. My name is Laura Fuchs. I'm a Ward 5 resident, DC Public School social studies teacher for the past 11 years. I'm an executive board member of the Washington Teachers Union. I chair a committee on political education. I'm a board member of the Ward 7 Education Council and Empower DC, and I'm an active member of the Senior High Alliance of Parents, Principals, and Educators. I say all this to say that I've met and spoken to many educators over the duration of my career, and I've seen countless educators come and go in this city. If we want to put a dent in teacher churn in DC public schools, the current evaluation system that DCPS uses, known as Impact, has to be repealed and replaced. It has created a toxic environment for all those involved in our schools. The only way to replace it is to work hand in hand with all those being evaluated to create a tool that is fair and fosters collaboration and growth instead of command and punish. Today, I'll be reading a selection of statements from educators across the city who wrote them in support of this express purpose. Note that almost no teacher would give me their name, school, or even grade level that they teach due to the fear that impact has created and the concerns that people have with speaking out. First quote says, "Teaching is a supernatural power. It's a power that allows you to make some life-changing effects on others. But what happens when that supernatural power starts to diminish? That's what impact has made a majority of DCPS teachers and staff feel. How does that align to DCPS's mission and vision? Help me, guide me, and uplift my practice as an educator. Rating me limits my growth. What comes after 4? Another teacher wrote, "I lose so much sleep. Time that I could be using to work with students on productive learning is wasted on LEAP. Nothing new, and it takes teachers out of the classroom, leading to higher class size. Teachers at schools with students who need more support are penalized due to student behavior, no matter how well the behavior is managed. There is no credit for that. It doesn't fit the rubric." Another teacher said, "I was officially diagnosed with depression and anxiety after my first Impact conference. I experienced increased anxiety right before every Impact conference. A psychiatrist prescribes stress reduction strategies and sometimes medication to make it through each conference. Impact creates the most stress when dealing with DCPS. The students are not a problem. It's this fear of making one human mistake that could or would possibly jeopardize my tenure within DCPS." Another teacher writes, "I'm a 10-year veteran who has been deemed highly effective by the Impact system. However, I believe Impact is a detriment to our schools, our teachers, and our students. Impact is the antithesis to effective schools. As a teacher, I live and work with the anxiety of Impact each day. When a student asks an interesting question that sparks educational curiosity, I worry that it will be the moment I'll be impacted and our class discussion won't match the objective. Further, Impact unfairly gives advantage to better performing schools." This goes on for like pages, and that was just what I got in one afternoon asking. So I mean, this just could go on for days, and it probably will, because I'll be back. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Benjamin Williams. I'm a DC teacher. I've been teaching in the district schools for 5 years now. Thank you for the board for making issues of teacher turnover or teacher retention a focus for the city schools. I would like to spend my time today further highlighting the importance of and the need to address issues surrounding educator turnover, school culture, and the working conditions for teachers and staff in DC schools. It's important to note that the working conditions for teachers are the learning conditions for students. I wholeheartedly believe that focusing attention to solve the issues of educator churn is the single greatest thing policymakers can do to sustainably improve teaching and learning in the district schools. We need to make sure that basic data about teacher turnover, teacher demographics, and the movement of teachers between schools gets collected and made public. We will reap what we sow, and we need to improve at sowing healthy, functional, and healthy, supportive, and functional working conditions for educators. I know that this is not the reality in too many of our district schools. In schools, the greatest capital to assist students is human capital. Therefore, any departure is a disruption of the human capital in a school and is significant for students, teachers, and administrators. As a member and leader of Empower Ed's Teacher Turnover Action Committee, I've worked closely with educators around the city in both the traditional public and charter sectors. As one of my colleagues and friends, Simona Spicciani, will testify here in a second, there are many options that the district has, including a comprehensive school culture initiative at Wilson that I believe can be effective at identifying real needs and developing real solutions in schools across the district. While school contexts differ, the effects of educator churn are far too familiar and consistent across schools. In my time teaching in the district, I've seen students lose weeks and months of learning when teachers depart from the school mid-year. I've seen and experienced the struggle of being a new teacher trying to learn the ropes of a new school, all the while knowing that the outcomes for students in these situations in which teachers are far from adequately supported, is far from ideal. Recently, over the past 3 years, I've seen and experienced tremendous growth and gains in my school's history department in our ability to vertically align our curriculum. However, I've also seen and experienced the tremendous deflation in morale that happens when passionate colleagues choose to leave the school. The reasons for departure are varied and the effects are far-reaching. Having a sustainable staff allows me to build and develop relationships in continuity and collaboration within the building. It allows for us to know each other's strengths. Our Teacher Action Committee looks forward to working with you on developing specific policy recommendations throughout the year. I unreservedly support your priority of working to get more complete research and data on this critical issue, and would like to close by saying that particularly new teachers in the district need to be supported. Veteran teachers need to be respected and valued for the expertise that they bring, and policy needs to refocus on cultivating a joyful profession instead of an isolating and temporary job. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Simona Spicciani Gerhardt. I've been teaching at Wilson High School for 15 years. I'm currently the chair of the World Language Department. My message to you today is that we are not going to be able to fix the teacher turnover crisis by focusing on recruitment strategies. We have to also address school climate issues that are driving teachers to leave. In 2017, scores of parents and teachers came to your School Board of Education hearings on the ESA school evaluation criteria and clamored for including a climate survey of parents, teachers, and students in the school report card. OSI's response was that the climate surveys that exist are not ready for prime time. Well, we at Wilson High School believed otherwise and started using the survey that Gary Ratner proposed be adopted in those hearings at that time. It's called SKY, which stands for the School Climate Assessment Instrument. We've been using it ever since to measure the quality of our school climate and culture. We survey parents, students, and teachers. The School Climate Committee, on which I serve, oversees the work, analyzes the survey results, and develops a plan to improve school culture. It has been an incredibly helpful process for Wilson. We like the SKY because it has an analytic threat structure rather than the Likert scale that describes 3 different stages, a range from least to most educationally effective. It's a very concrete and useful guide for what a school should improve upon. Our School Climate Committee meetings have been effective and productive thanks to the structure of the survey and the analytical report provided by California State University of Los Angeles that developed this survey. The School Climate Committee identified the primary needs of 5 specific school climate dimensions out of the 8 that are listed. And the 5 specific school climate we work on were appearance and physical plant, faculty relations, student interaction, leadership, decision-making, social-emotional culture. The school and 6 subcommittees developed and implemented the action plans to address those school needs. The second time we administered the survey, our score in the 5 dimension went up, and we are right now improving. I want to clarify that the climate survey I'm talking about is a broad instrument developed nationally and used by school to measure overall school culture. It is different from the tool that Empower Ed teachers have developed for use in school-based work. I'd like to encourage the State Board to revisit this issue and consider including a broad climate survey as a measure on the school report card, or at least expanding to other schools the pilot use of sky in the city schools.
Thank you all. Let me just say to our new board members who may not totally know the process here, we now have an opportunity, if we choose to interact a bit with our panelists. You don't have any more than 3 minutes, so let me know if somebody would like to make a comment or ask a question of our panelists.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming to the meeting. I just wanted to make a comment and say thank you all for sharing your ideas on teacher retention, and we all know that this is a very important issue. And not only has the State Board been working diligently, but also the Student Advisory Committee to talk about teacher retention and specifically how it affects students. So I would like to be in touch with all three of you to come talk to the Student Advisory Committee. But based off of what you guys said, you make some really good points. Thank you.
Gasoi.
Hi, thank you all. Ms. Can you say your name? Sorry. Yes. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about this tool and actually who does the evaluation. Does it engage staff in the school? How, tell us a little more about it.
That's actually the power that is a tool that is used by the insiders of the school. So it's the idea to have a tool like an effective survey like this that I explain why it's effective. I can explain that more, but it's a tool that is used by the school versus having a survey that is done by DCPS. And actually, that's why Wilson initially was gathering data from the Insight survey, and we were just unable to use it. We were not able to identify the primary needs of the school. So we asked to our principal, as a school climate committee, if we could adopt this survey because it's just a higher level needs assessment. And once we got the results, then the school climate committee that I chair with the assistant principal, so the leadership of the school was totally on board, and that's the key part, of course. Then within the school climate committee, we analyzed the data. We got the report from the California State University, Los Angeles, and the report is extremely helpful because due to the type of survey becomes concrete, the 8 dimensions of the school climate, you really see where the school needs to work. And we identify our 5 areas, and then inside those 5 areas, you have specific items. So it's visually clear, and then when you see the scoring, you easily turn that data into objectives, and that's what we did in the school climate committee, and then the objective became action plans. So we had subcommittees to be in charge of each objective and action plans. And we also used the logic model as a way to create action plans. So we have our way to measure the quality of our action plans.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for testifying, especially Ms. Fuchs. I just wanted to let you know that the State Superintendent of Education has committed to doing a school climate portion to be included in our report card. And if I'm correct, it should be coming out shortly. The school climate survey, will it be ready for? I know you're working. I know you were working on it. I have no idea when you're going to release it, but I know that was a thing we asked for in the last iteration of the SF report, et cetera, and on the report card. And I know that they've committed to doing it, and they have put it out to. They're designing it now.
I'll say actually that we have implemented and instituted a number of different kinds of school climate surveys through the state offices in a variety of our divisions. And we are implementing a new one this year with hopes to have some feedback about the value of it, as well as one of the ones that we've been actually implementing for a number of years as well, to provide options and feedback on how these different surveys are working across our schools and to look forward to other future options of implementing something at a larger scale.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted you to know that we were working on it.
Hi, thanks very much for your testimony. I wanted to thank first Mr. Williams. I really like the way you put, I can't figure out how to sit without that being in the way of my very short face. I really like the way that you put that the working conditions for teachers are the learning conditions for students. That's a phrase that's going to stick with me for a while. So I just want to say thank you because that's a lot to chew on. Then I wanted to also follow up with some questions on the school climate survey. It sounds fascinating, like a very interesting tool. It also sounds like a big lift for the folks who are involved in both administering it and those who are involved in taking it and those who are involved in disaggregating the data or aggregating the data and deciding what it means. So can you just tell us a little bit about the process of what it looks like in terms of time, people, workload to do this kind of survey?
So the first time that we did the survey 2 years ago, we did it only for the students and the teachers. For the teachers, it was possible to use the electronic version, and for the students, due to the amount of students we have, it was for 600 students. And so I want to stress that since this is on top of everything else, we couldn't use the computer, so we had to do it on paper. And it was a lot of work, but we had students volunteered in entering everything. So it was, especially the first time we had to organize that, we had many people involved. So it was challenging, but challenges also push you to create even more teamwork. And that is the power of this type of instrument that push the insiders of the school, the stakeholders of the school to work together to really understand what's going on in the school. And having ownership of this is the key part. Because again, I had to stress this is the reason why I asked my principal if we could adopt this, because before we didn't have the ownership and we couldn't have access to the data. So once we had the results, we started organizing Monday morning meetings. And again, that is extra credit, extra work for sure, but that's how you start when you try to make a change. So I can say that the first semester, every Monday morning, we had our school climate committee, and it was chaired by me. Our assistant principal, Gary Ratner, supported us. It was our consultant. And we had students, we had a member from the PTSO, and the administration. So we had a representation that when we look at the data, and the first round of decision was what are our priorities. So that was the first cycle of process. Once we identified them, we created the teams, as I said before, the teams to identify the specific objective, and then the action plans, and then the follow-up. And with the system of the logic model, we try to measure, okay, did we really move something? Did we create a change? Because the overall mistake is you do actions, but maybe the action went well, but what kind of change were you trying to do? So the survey helps you understand what is the change that you really want to see. Because sometimes you do actions, but to change what? So that's the beauty of the tool.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all. Well, thank you for sharing. I have two questions, and if you can keep responses short, just for the sake of time, that would be greatly appreciated. First,
I'm sorry, it was an inside joke with Jack.
Okay. I'm missing all the fun. First, Ms. Fuchs, thank you for sharing about the impact evaluation system. Curious if you wouldn't mind elaborating on one or two specifics, perhaps things that are positive about the evaluation system, if any, and then one or two specifics of the drawbacks. And so I gathered many of the categorizations of the system as a whole, but what exactly are you finding that teachers are feeling so troubled by? And then Ms. Gerhardt, if you can speak to the outcomes of the survey. I took note that you mentioned that scores have gone up for the last 2 years, I believe. What correlation, if any, has this had to teacher retention at Wilson? And are you all even capturing that data or making those connections?
Kind of a wide variety of things to try to, I think the attempt was to be holistic at how to look at teachers and to look at all the things we do and give us credit for that. Unfortunately, it got turned into a weapon. And so currently teacher evaluation is weaponized in the city for DC public schools. And honestly, to me, the tool is not the issue. I mean, it changes every year, so how could it be the issue? Which is a whole other problem. But it's that basically teachers are afraid of it because they've seen people, like someone just walk in and basically lie about what's happening, and it's very unstable, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I mean, there's a lot of procedural problems and training problems and the relationship between admin and teachers. But I think the intent at first was kind of positive, but we just need to get rid of it and start fresh because no one's going to trust it. It changes all the time. Sorry.
Well, it's interesting you ask about do we have any change with the teachers' retention. When we did this, that was when, you probably remember when at Wilson High School we had a turnover of 25%. It was 2 years ago. And that motivated us to do something about the climate because we totally see the correlation of that. Last year, we still had turnover of our teachers, not as much. What we work on in particular during the first round was the school climate dimension of leadership decision making, which we believe that drives everything. Before, there was not that the idea of sharing decision-making process. There was a lot of complaints about the quality of the faculty meetings. There was lack of shared goals. In the end, how can you have teamwork and share ownership if there are no goals in place? So again, that's the beauty of the tool, that first you do the needs assessment, and then you develop the goals, you develop the objectives, so the community has clarity on what we need to work on. And that is the foundation that was missing, and thanks to that, we could create camaraderie, teamwork, leadership, a lot of leadership, because each subcommittee had a chair, and there was also students. We're really working a lot on students' ownership with this process. And SGA, for example, is another big project of the committee. So each dimension went up, and for the second survey, we see the comparison between 2018, 2017, 2018. So it's really a continuity of seeing where we were and where we want to go to. It's very organic versus the insight service that we had from DCPS. We were not able to read them so clearly. So we can see that, okay, we are growing, and we can explain why. And the area of leadership is definitely where we are doing much better.
Thank you.
I've only been out of the classroom for a year and a half, and I know what the impact of the impact was since it began. and it wasn't a positive impact at all. And one of the things that Mr. Williams, you mentioned about teacher retention was the data on where teachers go. And that's so important. And hopefully we're going to be working on that and finding out, why do teachers leave? Because they will go, or they will go someplace else, and the system will never know why they left. Now, I'm a believer that a lot of teachers left DCPS and the charter schools because the teacher retention rates are basically the same because of the pressure that the impact put on. And I think it was sort of shown on the report card that came out in December, that which I don't think is a real perfect view of what a school is. I think that the school climate is very important on a school's report card, and I think that has to be upgraded. And I also think that growth that the students make is the most important thing on a report card. We as parents, when we got our students' report cards, we were looking for growth, all right? And I think that's very important. Mr. Williams, do you know any kind of stats about that we could work with as far as where the teachers go, and if there's any kind of an exit survey for teachers when they leave a building, and if not, should there be?
Thank you. I think that's a great question. I don't know of anything too useful. I know that my school in particular, and the past two schools I've been at, both Two Rivers and Capital City, will have started focusing more on collecting that data so that they can have that more internally. But that isn't necessarily information that I'm privy to as a teacher. But I think that I just more have anecdotal information from talking to people and nothing formal on understanding where people go. And but I do think that the general conditions and the stresses, whether it be impact, and I have not personally taught under impact, but essentially the demands and the work-life balance and the expectations that is put on teachers are something that need to be more reasonable and realistic, and in which school buildings and principals in particular need to have more autonomy over those things.
Can I do a follow-up? Okay, good. I'll watch it. The PARC test, I think that also has to do with teacher retention. I was wondering if either of you would like to comment on that.
I mean, having it included in impact is a huge problem, and it disadvantages teachers who teach the students who need the best teachers, and makes it more likely for them to switch schools to a school where the kids that are evaluated on PARC are already doing well.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you, President Wattenberg, and thank you all for joining us here this evening. I really appreciate it. Ms. Fuchs, you spoke a lot about impact, and I understand the importance of it. How many charter schools use impact? It's a DCPS issue. So the State Board of Education deals with statewide education policies that affect both DCPS and charters. And so how have your conversations with council members who actually have oversight over DCPS gone?
I mean, the issue that we have is that pretty much in this city, everyone has abdicated power to the mayor, and because the chancellor does unilaterally decide our teacher evaluation system in DCPS, it hasn't gone very far. I mean, I testify on it at the public hearings, and I do what I can, and so do other teachers, and we write to them, but honestly, most people don't want to tell the mayor what to do on education. I guess that was the idea behind mayoral control, and so we're kind of left out in the open. We are trying to work with Farabee if he gets confirmed to see if we can get a change.
Thank you for your advocacy, Ms. Fuchs. I really appreciate it. And Ms. Spicciani? I'm not even getting close, am I?
You can call me Simona Gerhardt.
Ms. Gerhardt. Did I hear, are you at Wilson High School? High School. Wonderful. The school climate survey is incredibly important, and that's why the former iteration of this board fought very hard to have a school climate survey included in ESSA, and got the superintendent to commit and write into ESSA that they would conduct pilot projects and then work with the board on getting this to every school. I think Wilson tends to have some advantages over some of the other schools, particularly in wards 5, 7, and 8. And are you able to partner with any of the more disadvantaged schools that have more at-risk students to help in supporting them on this? And then if you could speak to the appropriateness of a school conducting its own climate survey versus a school system or a state superintendent of education conducting the school climate survey so that a school could not manipulate its own results.
Well, that is the plan. Originally, Wilson was supposed to be the pilot. And now, after 2 years, a school that we are talking about in Power Ed could be, for example, Anacostia. That would be, for me, an ideal project. Anacostia, and I would add the feeder, Anacostia's feeder, so middle school and the elementary school. I think we are ready to add other schools to enlarge the pilot. So we can totally do that. We have enough experience and people who work to see how you can manage the tool, because something that we had to clarify, this is a survey, it's not a program, it's a powerful tool, but you need to know how to use it. So the fact that now we have a school like Wilson who went through 2 years of experience is extremely valuable, and I think it will make sense to enlarge the pilot. So I'm up to that, and we can work on that project. The second question, I never thought of that. I understand in terms of evaluation, the fact that the school is using the survey, it can create conflict, but that is the issue of data. That data is not supposed to be used just for a report card. It's supposed to use to have the information to improve the school. So to me, there are two different purposes. And the data so far of the type of assessment we had have never been used to understand and to create improvement, but just they've been used only as a report card. And that is the problem, because we're not creating improvement at all. So there are two different conversations to me.
Thank you, I appreciate your testimony. My time's out. Thanks.
Vice President Batchelor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all. I really just wanted to take a few seconds to thank all of you, both for providing us with very useful information about how we can improve both the quality of the environment for our schools, but also the supports for our educators. All of you know that we've come a long way in this conversation. It was just under a year ago where when we brought this issue of teacher turnover up, there was a rejection by our institutions that there was even a problem with turnover in our system. And so the fact that today, not only are we having a citywide conversation about turnover, but that this body has taken up the work to research it and get to the bottom of why our teachers are leaving at a higher rate than anywhere else in the country, I think is a testament to your hard work and your advocacy. So I just wanted to take a few seconds to thank you for that, and obviously to enlist you all as we continue this work to really get to the bottom. I think this board has done a very good job at demonstrating, at getting the numbers right, at proving that there was an issue. Now we've got more conversations and more research to do to make sure we get to the why and then get to solutions. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask questions now, but thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for your questions, and we will take the next panel. David Tansey, DCPS teacher, Liz Koenig, DC Charter School teacher, and Mark Simon, Empower Ed Board of Directors. As with the previous panel, you each have 3 minutes to speak, and you may begin when you are ready. Mr. Tansey.
My name is David Tansey, and I'm a math teacher currently teaching at McKinley Tech High School. I've come tonight to share my experience with teacher turnover in the district. I started my teaching career at Paul Laurence Dunbar High School. Almost immediately, I recognized the need to establish committed, trusting relationships with my students. In my first semester as a teacher, I offered a student some advice. He retorted, "Why should I care what you think? You won't be here next year." He wasn't right about me, but he was right about a lot of his teachers. Over my 7 years there, I was constantly reminded of the cost of teacher churn. New teachers struggled to establish their authority with students who saw them as temporary staff. Vertical alignment of content became impossible. Institutional knowledge about how best to engage a particular student or which summer programs were both enriching and affordable was lost not long after it was formed. My club, the Gentlemen of Dunbar, was the only club that existed long enough for student leaders to have risen through the ranks and pass on generational wisdom. My longevity allowed me to invite former students, now graduates, to speak to the incoming freshmen, to share their experience and leave them with a sense of their own futures and the legitimacy of the institution they were entering. I was also reminded regularly of why teachers leave. During my second year as the head of the contracting group managing Dunbar became its acting principal, he introduced himself to the staff as the Terminator. Our professional development sessions to this day are not designed around the problems we are facing in our classroom. Impact is frequently used to enforce compliance rather than to help teachers build their capacity to serve their students. There is commonly an obsession with tested subjects and a neglect for others. These all speak to the misalignment between what was demanded of us and what we could see our students needed. We had some good years. One principal, Stephen Jackson, was much more focused on building a vibrant and sustainable staff culture. He appreciated the work teachers did to establish relationships with students and make their lessons relevant and engaging. He would push back on the central office initiatives that he or his teachers felt were not helping our students. He balanced serving his many bosses with serving the school and its staff. But even he eventually reached his limit, and we had yet another principal. He is the only Dunbar principal over the past decade to provide students with the experience of graduating with the same principal they started their high school journey with. The next principal was more like the one who was there my second year. He wanted compliance. If you wouldn't provide it, he wanted to replace you with someone who would, and downtown did not seem to mind that. When I left Dunbar, no one above me seemed to care. No one asked me what they might do to help keep me there, and no one asked me what would compel me to walk away from the students I had committed the better part of a decade to. I'm still conflicted about my decision. My second year at McKinley, a student approached me and asked if I was Mr. Tansey. When I said yes, they said, "Mr. Tansey from Dunbar?" When I confirmed that, she said, "My brother Miles says you need to come back to Dunbar to raise another generation." I taught Miles his freshman year. He had just graduated and was in an apprenticeship program to become an electrician, a career he had explored with me in my signature college collage and career analysis project. I have been told by one principal and two APs that the project is not part of the official curriculum and, through coded language, that it was not preparing my students for Park. Teacher turnover will only be reduced when we make it an explicit goal, when we recognize we can only have high-quality schools if we can maintain a teaching staff. We have to want to know why we are losing good teachers and good school leaders in schools that can't afford such loss. We have to be honest with ourselves about why we don't value this when our students so clearly do. And we need to engage in the hard work of creating school environments that provide meaningful experiences to students and are joyful places to teach, learn, and lead. Thank you.
My name is Liz Koenig, and I am a charter school teacher and a member of Empower Ed's Teacher Council. Thank you for focusing on teacher turnover in DC. This is the third charter school I've worked at in 7 years teaching in DC. Excuse me. And in the middle of my 5th year there, I'm part of the most senior staff at the school. Every spring I have to spend part of my parent-teacher conferences assuring families I will return. And I start every conversation with colleagues in the lunchroom with, "Have you gotten your employment agreement yet? Are you coming back?" I'd like to not have these conversations every spring. Teacher turnover is so important because it is the foundation of all other improvement attempts. It seems to me that many school leaders fail to realize that you can't successfully roll out any other initiative and expect it to succeed if you're changing the people involved every 1 to 3 years. Not only will new staff members have different ideas about what initiatives are worth pursuing, but new staff will have to be trained and brought up to date on ones that are continuing. Once a school leader turns over, then pretty much everything is lost. I'm experiencing that right now at my school with a new principal this year. Among programs that have been lost in my 5 years at my school are Hispanic Heritage Month activities, grade level team leader positions, Girls on the Run, a new leaders initiative for young boys in our school, and a school-wide PBIS framework. They were all started and now have been abandoned. In short, measuring teacher retention should be seen as taking the pulse of a school. If the pulse is strong, then other measures designed to improve the systems have a chance at success. If the pulse is weak, then you'll be wasting your energy focusing anywhere else. As we move forward focusing on this issue in the city, please keep in mind that we need data across both sectors, traditional and charter, and solutions that can apply to both. We need answers to questions such as how many teachers leave DCPS for charters and vice versa, how many leave for Maryland schools or Virginia schools. Without knowing the directions of the flow and the reasons behind the moves, we will be navigating in the dark. I know that the SBOE has no formal control over charter organizations and correcting the pressures at each school that are leading to high turnover there, but I urge you to use your influence to change the conversation in the city toward pursuing well-informed, teacher-empowering policies that will work to end the culture of teacher churn. Key to this effort will be ensuring public access to the data that is collected. Hard and honest conversations are needed, with as many voices as possible represented. Let's make public education truly public and universal. Thank you.
My name is Mark Simon, and I'm here tonight not as a DC teacher, but as a member of the Board of Directors of Empower Ed. And I want to start by thanking the State Board for your work together with Empower Ed on the teacher turnover issue. It's just been so important. And I want to applaud the teachers, the members of Empower Ed's Teacher Turnover Subcommittee, whose eloquent testimony tonight bears witness to the importance of this issue. As they've told you, fixing teacher turnover requires a focus on school culture, not just recruitment. Fixing teacher turnover, it means investigating things like how impact might be playing a role, which could be a useful research project for the new independent research entity, for example. It means, most importantly, making sure that teacher data is collected, as Liz said, and made public in both the charter and DCPS sectors. Our teacher turnover work with you on the State Board of Ed has been driven by input from 30 to 40 members of the Teacher Council of Empower Ed, reflecting the perspectives of a diverse set of teachers in both sectors, every ward, elementary and secondary. Our confidence in you, our elected representatives on education, has only grown with the election of so many new members to the State Board of Ed who are teachers. And so many of you who campaigned for office by highlighting the crisis in DC with some of the highest teacher turnover and principal turnover rates in the nation. So we're proud and hopeful that our collaboration with the State Board on this issue seems like it's just begun. We'd love to, for example, get your help to begin to offer workshops to schools using the survey instrument that teachers developed as a tool to focus on improving professional climate. As Simona mentioned, there are two surveys that we're talking about. One is the one that they're piloting at Wilson, hopefully to be used in the report card, but the other is a much more specific one that teachers in Empower Ed have developed, and we're looking to pilot its use in a set of schools this spring. So let's talk about how maybe you can help us to do that. And we look forward to implementing the recommendations that I think are coming to you tonight from your own staff on teacher turnover. We understand that your statutory role is limited and that you have to choose your battles and your priorities. But as Ben said in the first panel, there's no higher priority in the short term than making sure that the basic data about teacher turnover, teacher demographics, and the movement of teachers gets collected and made public. You actually have a unique role in DC to push and pull OSSE, DCPS, the Public Charter School Board, the DC Auditor, and the DC Council to action. Leaving the agencies to their own devices for a decade has resulted in this basic data remaining largely opaque. Our message today is that this is a front-burner issue. You've taken the lead by contracting with Mary Levy to bring some of the data to light. We encourage you to keep carrying the ball, to perhaps propose to the DC auditor that her office gather and analyze teacher data as an audit function in the coming weeks and months. And we just want to thank you tonight for your attention and for giving us hope.
Thanks to all of you. Before asking my colleagues who would like to ask you questions or follow up, I want to thank Empower Ed, which worked very closely with the State Board and with the State Board staff to pull together the great conference in December, I think, and the follow-up recommendations and the survey. So thank you very much. It has been a great collaboration. I know everybody here is very eager to continue that. Further questions, comments, responses? Dr. O'Leary?
I would like to talk to the teachers for a second because both of you are in the beginning part of your careers, and I know that one of the biggest problems that we have is when we're not losing teachers at the end of their careers. We're losing teachers at the beginning of their careers. And one thing that I'm interested in is mentorship for new teachers. And I was just wondering if you could both, the two of you could speak to the role that mentors may have helped you stay in the game for the time that you have stayed in the game. Were mentors helpful, or were there any available to you? Because I think that that's something that we can work on is getting mentors to new teachers so that they can learn how to be teachers. Because you don't start as a teacher knowing what you're doing, I don't think. I know I didn't. And I think that mentors are very important.
I'll just say that we don't really have enough senior people at my school to act as mentors, people who have been in the teaching profession for decades and decades, and that I was kind of thrust into a mentor role in my third year at my school just because I was the one still around. And as I came to teaching as a career switcher, you know, my age just kind of made me a mentor towards the younger teachers who were struggling, like you said. So it is hard, especially in the charter schools that are just these little units. Each charter school, I have no idea what their mentorship programs at each and every one, the 120 in the city. But at my school, there isn't a traditional, formal mentor program. There has been one in the past, but it disappeared. And there really aren't any educators on staff that can kind of step up to that role for, at least in my department at my school.
I'll echo that. Liz brought up the point that if you can't have enough staff retention, no initiative is sustainable. And mentorship, I think, is probably one that requires even higher level of retention. I'm in my 10th year of teaching in DC. That makes me an old-timer. And I was the second most senior math teacher at Dunbar my third year. And I started having student teachers my third year who came from Howard University, then later Math for America, which is a secondary track to teaching for math majors. And I think it was very important, and I think it was really important that they were able to be in my classroom and be vulnerable, because I was the one who would take the heat if someone came into my class and things weren't going well. So it allowed them to try things out, to learn different styles and experiment, whereas we have such a high stakes environment and such a sense of urgency and fear that no one gets to try to spread their wings, because if you do anything outside of the expected and someone shows up, it's over. And so I do think a mentorship is important, but I think that's why we need to be making the call to have people around long enough to become mentors, and I'd say someone used the term organic earlier, so that the culture of teaching is organic, because downtown can't teach us how to do this. Like, people who are in the classroom and who have worked with these specific students and needs are the ones who have to teach us how to do that. There is no off-the-shelf solution.
Other comments, questions from the dais? I want to make just two comments and then follow up on Mr. Simon's question. I was at, I guess it was a week ago, Ms. Robinson, at the Student Advisory Committee, which was meeting on this subject, and they talked a lot. They were talking about the effect of teacher turnover on students, and I was stunned at the discussion, which was largely around how many substitute teachers students end up having, and long-term permanent subs or a series of temporary subs while the teacher churn goes on. And I think that might be something that we want to work with the students on to somehow document and just create a sense of urgency among people to do something, because I do think agencies want to do something about it, but we need to bring it to their attention. I see that as an important role that we can play. And the other thing I do want to say is, Dr. O'Leary, I think taught for 47 years, am I right? Yeah. So I'm hoping he will have some really good ideas for us on teacher retention. Mr. Simon, you were talking about things that you would like for us to do. One was to help us to work with schools on the new survey. You want to say another word about that? And if there's a couple, and I heard from several of you and from previous people the role we could play in data and working with OSSI to try to make sure that we get the data across the sectors that we can work with. You want to add something to that, or?
Well, Empower Ed has done some terrific work, and the entire teacher council of Empower Ed was involved in developing what we think is a pretty good instrument for building trust and building collegiality in schools and kind of start those conversations. So we hope that this spring we can identify a set of schools to begin piloting that survey and kind of beginning that work. So we'd love to talk with you more about how you can help us with that. So we can do that offline.
Just following up on that question, so you mentioned that there is the Sky survey that's being used at Wilson, and now the Empower Ed survey. Do you see these as complementary, or would they be, would we want to examine them as, using one or the other, or can you say a little bit more about?
Yeah, no, they're completely complementary. They're for a different purpose. Right?
Okay.
The Empower Ed one is a tool that helps the teaching staff and the administration kind of do work together on building trust and kind of addressing the adult relationships in a school. The other survey, and I'm thinking back to 2 years ago when Gary Ratner, came to the state board talking about the Sky survey. It's a nationally developed instrument that a lot of work went into making a highly reliable and valid instrument. It's being used in California. But so if the state board was interested in identifying an instrument that could be used, for example, in the report card, an instrument to be used district-wide, then that would be more the purpose. It's a much broader survey. It looks at the facilities. It looks at a wide range of things.
President Wattenberg. Just a quick comment in terms of good government and transparency. I think we need to be very cautious as a government body to make sure that we are open and honest about who is before us and who we're questioning. We had last month a member of my law firm was before us, and I recused myself from questioning that person because we had a relationship outside of this, and I disclosed that. I believe there are a couple of board members that are on an advisory board for Empower Ed, and I just want to make sure that we're very transparent about that as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. I am on the board of Empower Ed, and okay, and we can determine if there's anything inappropriate about that going forward, but that is true for tonight. Okay, well, thank you so much. This is a huge issue for us. We are in retreat, I believe, next week, and I know one of the issues that we're going to be talking a lot about is how to follow up on this issue, so I expect we will be in touch with you and continue to bring attention to this. Thank you very much.
Madam President?
Yes.
In the interest of time and in consideration of the many folks who've come to both speak to us tonight, but also those we're honoring, including one in particular who I think has a few students who probably won't hold on much longer, I move to motion that item 9 on our agenda be moved to an agenda item immediately preceding our adjournment.
Second for that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great. All right. Tonight, the State Board will be considering 2 ceremonial resolutions. We use ceremonial resolutions to recognize and honor people, schools, sometimes items of note. Our first resolution honors Maisha Riddlesprigger, the 2019 DCPS Principal of the Year. I would like to turn to our Ward 8 Representative Markus Batchelor for the motion.
So moved, Madam President.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, will you read the resolution into the record?
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing Maisha Riddlesprigger as the DCPS 2019 Principal of the Year, CR 19-1. Whereas the District of Columbia Public Schools has awarded the DCPS 2019 Principal of the Year Award to a valued educator, Maisha Riddlesprigger, a principal at John H. Ketchum Elementary School. Whereas Ms. Riddlesprigger holds a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in education studies from the University of California and a master's degree in educational administration from California State University. Whereas she started her career in education in Compton, California as a 5th grade teacher and has also shared her education expertise managing professional development and recruiting teachers in California before coming to Washington, D.C. Whereas Ms. Riddlesprigger came to DCPS in 2009 as vice principal at Davis Elementary School, becoming the principal there before coming to Ketchum Elementary School 6 years ago, and whereas Ms. Riddlesprigger is committed not only to Ketchum Elementary School, but to the Ward 8 community, where she works actively to maintain high standards for her teachers and students while also providing the support needed to achieve them, as demonstrated by significant increases in student achievement. Now therefore be it resolved that the D.C. State Board of Education recognizes and honors the commitment and support that Ms. Maisha Riddlesprigger provides every day to the students, staff, and community of Ketchum Elementary School and the District of Columbia.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded, is there discussion?
Well, thank you. I think there's not much there's no time to say enough about Principal Riddlesprigger and the impact that she's not only had on Ketchum Elementary School, but our entire Ward 8 community. But I'll just say briefly that the honor is well-deserved. Principal Riddlesprigger is not only a leader inside her school building, but is extremely supportive of her staff, and is not only a leader inside her school, but has become a community leader. Whenever we call on her, she's there. Whenever she needs to be there for her students, for her parents, for the members of her community, she always steps up to the plate
And she works overtime, even among tremendous headwinds, to bring the resources that her students need to be successful into the building, even though they might not be organically present. And so when we talk about the ideal community school that has a strong leader, I advise everybody in this room to go and visit Ketchum Elementary School. And not only are they providing tremendous services and tremendous supports, but they are seeing the results to show it. Achievement is up, family engagement is up, attendance is up, and those are the things that we count on our school leaders to do. And so, like I said, I think the honor is well deserved, and I'm very appreciative for the indulgence of our colleagues for honoring her tonight, and really paying homage to the transformative work she's doing at Ketchum. So thank you.
I would just like to say, from the work that I've seen, from going to meetings with my mom to just being in your school and seeing how you interact with your students and staff, I must say I'm really proud, and I thank you for serving with it.
I'll learn how to do this. Okay, seeing none, we take a vote. And congratulations. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The ceremonial resolution shall be yours very shortly. Our second resolution. Our second resolution recognizes National School Choice Week, which occurs from January 20 to 26th. Ms. McClay, would you like to make that motion?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth, could you please read the resolution?
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution to recognize National School Choice Week, CR 19-2. Whereas National School Choice Week is a nonpartisan initiative that seeks to raise awareness of K through 12 education options available to students in the United States. Whereas since 2011, the first year in which National School Choice Week was held, there have been more than 58,000 affiliated events held. Whereas National School Choice Week recognizes all K through 12 options, including traditional public schools, public charter schools, public magnet schools, private schools, online academies, and homeschooling, according to the organization of the same name. And whereas the National School Choice Week will be held January 20th through 26th, 2019. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education thanks the organizers of National School Choice Week for their efforts to raise awareness of the range of options available to students in the District of Columbia and nationwide.
The motion having been properly, okay, thank you. Is there discussion on the resolution?
Yes, Madam President.
Ms. McClay?
I am proud to recognize National School Choice Week in DC, a national, nonpartisan, non-political, independent public awareness effort that celebrates all of the incredible education options in our city. School choice means giving parents access to the best K through 12 education options for their children. These options not only include traditional publics, neighborhood schools, public charter schools, and public magnet schools, but also private online academies and homeschooling. During National School Choice Week, individuals plan tens of thousands of independent events around the country. There are many events at DCPS and charter schools, homeschool groups, and organizations that are raising public awareness of the different K through 12 education options available to children and families around our city that I will be attending next week, and I hope others will as well. Every child deserves an effective, challenging, as well as motivating education. Today's students are tomorrow's leaders, and I am proud that we empower parents and students to make the best choices for their family. With that, thank you.
Madam President, may I add something? I just want to say I'm thankful that this resolution has been brought forth before the board. As someone who is a strong supporter of public school choice, I'm excited that this is something I get to vote on at our first meeting. And I do hope that families across the city will take part in these events that are happening next week as we're in the middle of the My School DC choice season here in the city. So thank you very much for bringing this resolution forward.
Any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none, the motion is on approval of the ceremonial resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no? The ayes have it. All right, we're going to do one more resolution. Never mind. The next resolution is different from the previous two because it is an official action of the State Board. The Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education was reconstituted within the State Board of Education 5 years ago to ensure its neutrality and independence. The members of the State Board appoint the Ombudsman for a term of 5 years and work to ensure that the office receives the support and assistance it needs. Tonight, the State Board is considering a resolution to appoint Serena Hayes, a resident of Ward 5, as the second Ombudsman under the State Board of Ed's mantle. Is there a motion on the resolution of appointment?
So moved.
The motion having been properly moved and seconded, Mr. Hayworth will read the resolution.
State Board of Education resolution to appoint Serena Hayes as Ombudsman for Public Education, SR 19-1. Whereas the DC State Board of Education has authority over the appointment of the Ombudsman for Public Education under the Ombudsman for Public Education Establishment Act of 2007, effective June 12, 2007. Whereas Section 602C of the Act notes that the State Board must appoint a new Ombudsman to fill the remainder of a vacant term within 75 days of the occurrence of the vacancy. Whereas the position of the Ombudsman for Public Education became vacant on August 13, 2018. Whereas the State Board of Education conducted a rigorous application process that included input from the public as well as stakeholders in the characteristics necessary for a successful ombudsman. And whereas the State Board conducted multiple rounds of review, including phone and in-person interviews, where the successful candidate impressed the panel and the board with her compassion and commitment to serving district students as well as demonstrating significant professional experience in conflict resolution and mediation. Now therefore be it resolved that the State Board of Education appoints Serena Hayes to the position of Ombudsman for Public Education for a term of 5 years to begin on January 22nd, 2019, and be it further resolved that the State Board of Education fully supports Ms. Hayes in her new role as she embodies the qualities needed to ensure the Office of the Ombudsman for Public Education continues to serve as a neutral resource for current and prospective public school students and their parents and guardians in the resolution of complaints and concerns regarding public education in a way that furthers students' best interests.
Is there discussion?
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to say to Ms. Hayes, thank you for joining us and really spelling out your vision for the Office of the Ombudsman. We're very excited about the work ahead, and we welcome you to the State Board and, of course, your family. And second, I'd just like to acknowledge the hard work of our acting Ombudsman and our forever Chief Student Advocate, Faith Gibson Hubbard, for all of the work you've done to make sure that not only the office stayed afloat, but enhanced its work. And we look forward to hearing more about the work that you've done in meetings to come, and obviously with you working closely with Ms. Hayes during the transition period, but also as her colleague and partner in the Student Advocate's Office. So thank you both so much for the work you've done and for all of the tremendous work we know you'll do in the future.
Additional discussion?
I'd also like to thank Ms. Hayes for really impressing us in the interview, and I know that the students and parents of the District of Columbia are in good hands after the good hands that they were in before.
Well, with that, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ms. Williams.
I would again like to echo welcome aboard, Hayes, and again to thank Faith for the wonderful job she did holding down the office in the 60 days, but I wanted you to know, she made sure we found somebody within those 60 days because she was tired of doing 2 jobs. Thank you both. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Faith, and thank you, Ms. Hayes. And I think we're going to, oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, the motion is on approval of this motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion is approved, and I just... and now we're going to take a break for a moment. If Ms. Riddlesprigger and Ms. Hayes could come to the front with their guests, we're going to take a 5-minute recess for some photos. Then we're going to delay the rest of our administrative business until after we have our panel, so that our other panel will be able to inform us and leave if they so choose. And now I am to knock the gavel for recess. Okay, we're going to get started so we can call up our panel. Portrait of a student. All students deserve an education that will prepare them for their future. No matter if they decide to go directly into a career or enroll in college, it is up to us as policymakers to determine what knowledge and skills we believe they will need and ensure they get it. Our panel tonight consists of 4 witnesses who are experts in that field. As I call your name, please come down to the witness table. Don Long, a consultant with K-12 education policy. Dr. Erin Bibo, Deputy Chief, College and Career Programs, DCPS. Sanjay Mitchell, Director of College and Alumni Programs for Thurgood Marshall Academy. And Kim Ford, Consultant Jobs for the Future. Thank you all for being here. Similarly to the public witnesses earlier, you will be timed tonight. Each of you will have 5 minutes, and then we will open it up to questions from board members. We will begin on my right.
Great. Good evening. My name is Erin Bibo. I'm the Deputy Chief of College and Career Programs for DCPS. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to share DCPS's perspective on the skills and knowledge that are needed by among the district's graduates before they graduate. I had the privilege of representing DCPS on last year's high school graduation requirements task force as well, and so can refer back to that from time to time. At DCPS, we believe that it is important that every student should feel loved, challenged, and prepared to positively influence society and thrive in life. And within our capital commitment, DCPS's 5-year strategic plan, goal number 1 is to double the proportion of students who are prepared to succeed in college and career, and then to triple the proportion of low-income students and students of color who are prepared to succeed in college and career. We know that 76% of all jobs in DC require some form of post-secondary degree or credential, and so we view preparing students for post-secondary success as fundamental to our work. As we have engaged colleges, industry leaders, students, and families around both what college and career readiness means to them, especially in the case of colleges and universities and industry, and then what our students and families need to feel prepared for college and career. There are 3 big things that I wanted to draw from those findings. Number 1, we found that our current DC high school graduation requirements align quite well to the basic college admissions requirements at the what we call top smart college choice institutions. So when we developed a matrix of colleges at which our students are most likely to succeed. We shared that, and I referred to it as Mr. Batchelor knows, I, like a broken record, whipped out the matrix over and over. We compared what are those basic courses in high school that students needed to complete in order to even be considered for admission into those colleges. And as the task force thought about if we change X requirement, we were able to view in real time how that would impact positively or negatively. What's happening? Am I doing, okay. How that would impact positively or negatively students' entrance or ability to even be considered, even be eligible for admission. And what we found was our requirements as they stand right now leave our students open to really all of those colleges and universities at which they are going to. And it wouldn't require many changes at all for them not to become eligible. There was actually a memorable moment, I'm going off script so I can look each of you in your eye, I hope you don't mind. There was actually a moment when we were toying around, well, if we changed this, how would this impact? And I pulled out the list and I said, well, that would mean that none of our students could go to NC Central
which is our students do great there. And literally one of the task force members sitting directly across from me, he was like, my daughter goes there. We can't do that. And so it was very helpful, and it was really helpful exercise to be able to go through. The second thing that we heard, and this is from, industry leaders, we have very robust industry advisory boards that support our students in career academies. And what the industry leaders have told us loudly and clearly is that internship experience and employability skills training and courses like the Tenacity Employability Skills curriculum that we have, I will hold it up. I'm sure that each of you has seen it at this point, and it's available online. That we had over 1,000 students complete last year, that they are giving our students really integral experiences and exposure to skill sets and mindsets that they are going to need in the world of work. When we think about sort of post-secondary, we think about college and career as very much interconnected. We don't view it as college or career, we view it as college and career. And so we were really heartened to see the state board consider adding and recommending to add internships as an option for community service credit. The last thing, and I know I'm out of time, the last but certainly not least, what we heard from students and families loudly and clearly is that they wanted very clear, proactive, personalized information about what they, specific student, or for their child needed, what steps they needed to take in order to stay on track and be on track to college and career. And so this April, we're really excited to share that all 9th through 11th graders at DCPS will receive a personalized post-secondary and graduation plan. It will be tailored to them. It will be informed by their post-secondary plans, by their scores, by the grades and courses that they have taken. And we believe that it aligns actually quite closely to the student learning plan report that that researchers recently authored for both the state auditor and for the State Board of Education.
Do I just start? Okay, great. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Sanjay Mitchell. I am the Director for College and Alumni Programs at Thurgood Marshall Academy in Southeast Washington, D.C. in the Great Ward 8. And so Thurgood Marshall Academy is a public charter high school that is in D.C. We are open enrollment, so our doors are open to anyone who participates in the My School D.C. lottery. So we have the unique advantage of having most of our student population coming from Ward 7 and 8, but we do have our portals open to anyone across the district. I am happy to share with you 5 tenets that we believe are skills and knowledge that our students need to be successful graduates of DC school, whether they are graduating from DC public charter schools or from DCPS schools on a whole. These are skills that we hold dear. I was happy to serve with my colleague, Dr. Bibo, and a few others here on the task force for graduation requirements. And like Erin said, I agree that some of the requirements that we have for DC graduates are really in line with what colleges are looking for and far above what most states are encouraging students to have as they consider post-secondary experiences. We are a college prep school, but we absolutely encourage our students to think outside of that realm, and we encourage and facilitate discussions around where we feel they would like to go once they've graduated from high school. So for us, the first tenet is we believe that all district students should be prepared academically and socially to succeed in college. Emphasis on the word socially. Looking at our student population, most of our students are coming from an area where there are a lot of first-generation college students, there are a lot of students who are below socioeconomic status, and so what we want to do is equip them with the ability to stand with someone or stand next to someone who is more advantaged than they are and not feel as if they don't belong in that space. Still feel like they can compete, still feel like they can thrive because they've had the academic preparation as well as the social, cultural, and capital building to ensure that they can survive in any academic space they choose to go. So how does TMA does this? Thurgood Marshall Academy has helped district students attain the skills by providing access to curriculum with rigor delivered with fidelity. That's the key word, ensuring that our students are exposed to rigorous curriculum, but also it's a fidelity that is being delivered in the content and not just giving students rigor and not being taught in an appropriate way. This also means exposure to post-secondary college opportunities such as dual enrollment courses, AP courses, summer enrichment programs provided through OSSE and through other means, and a robust and well-resourced college counseling program that ensures that students are not only getting into college, but are also getting through college. This should involve providing a guided, nurturing atmosphere that encourages engagement in the college process by faculty, staff, students, friends, families, neighborhood, community, etc. This idea of post-secondary attainment is not one that is just held dear by student. It is an investment by the student and the entire family structure. From big brother, aunt, uncle, cousin, neighbor across the street, everyone should be invested in the student's success. District students should also possess the oral and written communication skills necessary to advocate for themselves and their communities. This is demonstrated through our portfolio presentation, which every student has to complete at the end of their academic year. Students have to discuss their academic achievement and citizenship qualities. So it's not just about how well you're doing in the classroom, but how well are you treating your teachers? How well are you treating your classmates? How well are you engaged in things that are actively involved in our democratic society? How are you engaging in those things, and how are you demonstrating that engagement? That's the key part. Students should take advantage of the numerous community service projects and engagement with our city. We live in a very unique city where you can engage not only with the city, but also on a federal level. And we encourage our students to participate in internships at the Supreme Court, all the way down to the museum, all the way down to the local library, all the way down to the local ANC office, just to ensure that they are involved and engaged in all levels of our society. Specifically for college and career, it is through these on-site admissions processes where students get to articulate and advocate for themselves to college representatives and showcase their talents and challenges in preparation for the next step. Our students should be independent thinkers who employ strong critical thinking skills, who successfully acquire and evaluate information, and who use technology efficiently and ethically. Our students will be able to build this agency by conducting qualitative and quantitative research so they can understand how to use technology as a critical thinking tool to solving some of our community's most challenging circumstances. We encourage our students to demonstrate leadership skills, individual responsibility, and self-management. Practice responsible citizenship by valuing honesty, integrity, by working cooperatively with others, and by embracing diversity. District students have been at the forefront of the March for Our Lives and Black Lives Matter movement here in the city. TMA student responded to the loss of two of their peers by working to create a student-run group called Pathways to Power. One of their initiatives is to advocate and fund for the creation of a mural in the city dedicated to commemorating the lives of DC youth taken by gun violence. Our students have been a vocal presence at city council meetings, press conferences, issues relating to the city, and are constant present on the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute and also on our School Board of Education Board. Hey, Marcus. Working with the Parkland students to address a specific challenge speaks to our ability to work across race and class, not only in our city, but also beyond the geographic borders. And lastly, we prepare our students to be lifelong learners who strive for excellence through diligence and commitment to achieving goals. District graduates go on to become members of their communities who effect change on many levels, whether it is changing their home by being the first to graduate from college, leading various student organizations on college campuses, or running for elected offices. Our district graduates are not afraid to strive for excellence and achieve goals despite perceived insurmountable odds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you, Madam President and board members for this opportunity. I'm Don Long, a consultant in learning, teaching, and leading policy, At the National Association of State Boards of Education, it was my pleasure to work with you and Virginia and other state boards on policies centered on student learning, including the profile of a Virginia graduate for achieving college, career, and civic readiness for every student. I will briefly discuss the profile, its development, and most importantly, if I get a chance, the momentum from this collaborative work toward an innovative state leadership model. I see that you propose that this is the year of that this may be the year of the student. Not surprisingly, you have perfect timing. Yesterday, the National Commission on Socio-Emotional and Academic Development called for a bold new course in education reform, moving from a nation at risk to a nation at hope. One of the most inspiring takeaways from the day was from a 7th grade student, clearly already a leader as you envision. "We are not the future, we are the present," she proclaimed. Yes, the future is now, and state boards are uniquely qualified to lead with students and citizens in using the leverage of an equity and research-based vision of student learning to seize the promise of this future. I want to provide a little context in this slide. This chart shows the daunting gaps that remain over 4 decades of standards-based reform, especially for historically underserved students. Many experts argue that we face an either-or decision. We can continue to perfect standards-based accountability systems, clearly not sufficient, or change trajectories by direct focus on building the capacity of teachers and leaders. I think this is a false dichotomy, and as shown in our collaborative work, we can and must do both. Building on the presentations of the first 2 panelists, this is the profile, and it illustrates the 4 main content areas. You'll see that it prioritizes, in addition to academic content, the employability and workplace skills that have been a long concern in education policy. And in addition, it focuses on community and civic engagement skills. This is for your future reference. Let me briefly point out that these areas go beyond the scope of academic content standards. The profile serves not only to supplement standards, but also serves as a powerful guide for enlisting other policy levers that have a direct impact on student learning, such as school leadership and teaching, and of course, high school graduation requirements, with pathways for successful post-secondary transitions. Let me just quickly say that I have presented on deeper learning before, and this does rely on that research base and also socio-emotional learning. And what is most important is that it deepens mastery of academic content by engaging students in applying what they learn and in transferring their learning to new problems, new situations, and new jobs. This builds their capacity and confidence to use their own judgment in problem-solving, creativity, and resourcefulness. And then this slide shows the ever-rising expectations of college and career readiness. This is the why and the how of the profile. Since the future is now, this is not only what students need to do to succeed at work, but is what school leaders and teachers need to master as well. They need to exemplify these same skills. And as discussed yesterday, this is based on a powerful research consensus that all learning is social and emotional. Okay, I'm going to have to quickly go over these slides, but this is the development process of the profile. It started in 2014, so it's a long process. It was just adopted by the board in January 2018, and it involved close collaboration with all 4 governance policy leaders, governor, legislature, State Department, and the board. And it involved close engagement with stakeholders and citizens, and represented a lot of powerful discussions across a broad variety of stakeholders. Let me say that some of the outcomes of this process, the board is responsible for developing a comprehensive long-term plan, and the two top priorities from this vision are developing enriched learning environments and investment in teachers, building a diverse, effective teacher workforce. In the interest of time, these are the elements of the profile that begin to show this emerging innovative state leadership model I talked about earlier for achieving statewide equity. The board, after this work, was charged by the legislature to develop recommendations for achieving statewide equity. And these recommendations included a deeper focus on resource equity, on developing teachers and leaders through residencies, grow your own programs, professional learning that's embedded in the workplace, and that was a key outcome for this work. So, as I said, this profile is a focal point for what should be happening in classrooms right now, and it's also a North Star. I think the real power of this is that it's a declaration of independence, if you will. It's a mobilizing document that citizens, leaders, educators can use to work with schools for continuous improvement. So one of the issues that we always face in education is perennial short-term time horizons, constant change, competing priorities. I would like to argue that that the key for success and the definition of policy is a sustained course of action for desired results. And that is what I think is the real power in this vision, is that you can use it, the way you develop it, by building inclusive state collaborative leadership and shared commitment, and use it by including citizens and stakeholders in developing it so that they have greater ownership in it. And that is the beginning of including them in your ongoing policy development, progress monitoring, and continuous improvement for achieving all those goals. Well, I'm not going to be able to have time for this, so maybe I can follow up later.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Ford? Thanks so much. My name is Kim R. Ford. I'm a consultant with Jobs for the Future, also a former Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of Education and Dean at the UDC Community College. I want to thank you guys for having me today and congratulate all the new members, and shout out to my ward new member, Mr. Parker. Good to see you. So I was asked to talk about the basic skills and competencies that need to be in place for high school graduates now, and to talk about a vision for DC graduates in the future, and that's what I'm going to do. And I just want to talk about, in terms of where we should be now, you've heard this from the other panel members, we should be there. I don't know that we are, but we should be there. And when we talk about a vision for the future is moving. Education is moving, it is moving fast, and it requires flexibility. So you're going to hear some of the same things from my colleagues up here, but I used to be a public speaking professor, so I know that repetition works. Good. Now, let me tell you where we need to be. Now. Every program has to have 3 components. If it does not have these 3 components, your students will not be successful. You have to have the academic skills, the technical skills, and the employability skills, period. If it's not all there, they will not be successful. Academic skills, we know what this is, what does the student has to know, right, and understand and learn. To do that, obviously, they need to fulfill the academic graduation requirements. I've highlighted here world language requirement. That's really interesting. That's an additional skill set for students. And then they have to be strong on the fundamentals. And one of the fundamentals is literacy, and we have to understand that literacy, reading, writing, numeracy, and digital. And not digital with Instagram. Digital meaning you really can operate. When I was at the community college, 96% of all of our students, including those walking straight out of high school, required remediation, meaning that they were not strong on their fundamentals. So we have to tighten that up. The technical skills. So you can't just know, you have to also be able to do. And this is not limited to construction and this and that. It is across the board. You have to be able to do. This is what, when people are saying, oh, I get a 4-year degree and employers aren't hiring because they don't know what you can do, okay? Bachelors and blah, 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 we don't know what you can do. So you have to have these students getting the best is work-based learning. I mean, that is where we want to be, but at least some hands-on experience or some simulated learning. And there's money out there, your career and tech ed money is out there. You have got to make sure the students have those technical skills. Now here, little Johnny, he knows how to do it, okay? He's learned it, he can do it, but guess what? He has to be successful in the workplace, right? Employability skills, we've all talked about it. If you can't show up on time, you're not gonna be successful. If you can't get along with people, a diverse set of people, you will not be successful. Employers have told people what they need, okay? Financial literacy, if you get a paycheck, but you can't get to work because you spent your paycheck, yet again, not gonna be successful. And we also have to make sure that we talk about ethics. Ethics is really important that I think we're lacking on. So if little Johnny doesn't have all of this, little Johnny's not gonna be successful. So we need to be there. If we're not there, we need to get there fast. All right, now, vision for the future. Where do we need to go? Where the country is going and where DC would be remiss if it was not there and a leader is students should graduate with 3 assets: the diploma, an industry recognized credential, and college credit, period. All 3. The ultimate vision is that that college credit should actually be an associate's degree. It should be diploma, associate's degree, industry recognized credential, but we're gonna save that for next year, which you're not gonna invite me back to speak, but that's fine. Now, what does that mean? In your diploma, we need to see if there are life skills there, okay? Life skills are different than technical skills and employability skills, okay? What we're talking about here is resilience, confidence, empathy. Some of our most academically talented students have been told that they're so smart, that they're so arrogant, that nobody wants to work with them, right? You know, at the community college, my students have been knocked down and they got back up. They had resilience. We need to find ways to do that in the diploma program, and you can do that through simulated experiences and case studies. Okay, industry recognized credentials, I could talk about it all night, I'm not. These students should graduate with an industry recognized credential. Okay, certificates, certifications, licensures. Do we all know those are different? Yeah. Okay, do we all know that they're not created the same? Do we also all know that third-party industry recognized credentials is very different than you completed my course, let me give you a certificate? No. Students need to graduate with an industry recognized credential, and it doesn't matter if they're going straight into a post-secondary track, because if that student has to do work study, for example, it's better for them to have an A+ certification and actually work in the ID department than be on work study, okay? They have the ability to make more regardless if they're going directly into the workplace or if they're going into a traditional post-secondary setting. And then the college credit, again, ideally an associate's, but these students need to graduate with college credit as well. It should be through true dual enrollment, meaning that the high school class and the college class is together, you're getting the credit together. There's also concurrent enrollment, but students really need to be graduating with college credit, and while, again, I believe the students should have flexibility and choice, there should be highly transferable credits. English, you know, math, not necessarily auto tech. Right? Okay, so we want to make sure that we do that. How do we do that? Flexibility. We've got to look at the way that students learn and the time that we have with them and create flexibility. These things need to be running in parallel. It's not do 9th grade, then 10th, then 11th, and if you've already finished, then we'll do dual enrollment, then we'll do, no. These things, they need to run in parallel, and they need to run in parallel on the secondary and the post-secondary side. It can be done, it's being done. Don't say it can't be done, and don't say it can't be done quickly. This will best position our students for success, and anytime you give me a mic, I'm going to say it. We have got to deal with this and versus or. Now you're gonna say, everybody up here said college and career. That is true. But what's really happening on the ground and nationally is that people are saying, you, college, and you, career. That's different. That is different, and we have to be real careful about what is going on. And I talk a lot about language and how students are talked to. You know, you say, "Oh, you're really good with your hands. You know, you could go get a trade. You're going to be great. You can make a lot of money doing that." There's a lot of interesting subliminal messages that are going on there, because you know what? People who are good with their hands could become surgeons. You know, we're working with our hands. So we've got to really start looking at the way students are being talked to and the way we're messaging college and career, because it really is coming out differently. And the last thing that I'm going to say is we've got to stop talking about education as if it's only K through 12 kids. I know Mr. Parker's gotten an earful, some others of you have gotten an earful. Look, if somebody is education is lifelong learning. And there are thousands of DC residents who are engaged in programs where they're about to get their high school credential and nobody's talking to them and nobody's talking with them. On Saturday, Academy of Hope Public Charter Schools graduating 24 graduates with their high school credentials. And those students should also be graduating with all 3 of those assets. So I encourage you to take a look at that. I thank you, and good night.
Thank you very much. This is terrific. Who would like to speak? Let me see. So we'll start with Mr. Parker. And then we'll just go this way, and then we'll come back and actually, I'm sorry, we're starting with Ms. Robinson.
Thank you all for sharing, and Ms. Ford for that spirited testimonial about what it takes to prepare both college and career-ready students. Dr. Bibo and Ms. Ford, you both talked about this aspect of internships, externships, also coupled with concurrent higher learning courses. Can you speak to any examples that you've seen where that worked really well? I can imagine that some of the challenge might be in credentialing, making sure there's alignment between what DCPS, for instance, qualifies as a course credit versus what a UDC might qualify as a course credit. So again, just if you could speak to examples of where that's worked really well, both on the internship side, but also concurrent higher learning courses. Thank you.
I'll start, and then Kim and I have worked together for probably like a decade now, so sorry, I just aged us both. That was a bit of a faux pas. So yeah, I'll highlight the internship piece, and then the sort of credential piece as well. And I'll speak to highlights, and I think that will sort of give us an example of where we could go. But I'll be the first to acknowledge that, especially in the sort of industry-recognized credentials, there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think that people who are experts in that could talk about that all night, as Kim mentioned. So about 4 years ago, we created the DCPS Career Ready internship. And we had 119 students, mostly who were in our career academies, pursuing paid, rigorous internships in the fields in which they were interested. That required a lot of wooing of industry leaders, industry sort of advisory board members to, in a city where most of our interns are college educated, if not college and beyond educated, to take a chance, to take a leap of faith on our students, and they did. And what I heard directly from them and directly from our students was that everybody, including the students, were very pleasantly surprised and proud at how well they did, right? The students gained a tremendous amount of self-belief, like, I can do this. We had a lot of our students talk about how they felt like they were actually being seen, really, for the first time in their city, in that capacity. And And the employers were again, very pleasantly surprised and said, you know, I thought that this wasn't going to work out. I thought I was going to come back to you and say, like, sorry, I'm not going to do this again, but I'm not. I'm in it for the long haul. What everybody said in their own way, though, was not that the students were lacking in the technical skills. Our students were learning that pretty well in the classroom, or, and Tatiana is like the perfect example of this, our students can do anything if you invest in them, right? And so they're sponges. Where our students were lacking was the employability skills. And let me be honest, as a college graduate in my first job, I was lacking in employability skills. These are not things that most districts teach. And so we met very intensively with those first 119 students, with the host employers, with experts in the field. We probably consulted with you to say, what are these skill sets and mindsets that all individuals need to succeed in the world of work? We heard a lot from students about self-advocacy. When you're in the world of work and not really able to speak to a boss who suddenly you just feel like they're mad at you, how do you say, I feel like I'm not meeting your expectations right now. How can we work through that because I want to succeed? Most people just shut down, and that's not very helpful, and that's not a positive experience. Talk about code switching. We talk about how do our students talk about and handle race in the work, talk about and engage in race in the workplace in a constructive way. How do our students draft a resume? We worked with junior achievement on a financial literacy section, and every year we update this, such that over 1,000 students are now completing the tenacity as either an elective course or an outside of school course if they opted to not take it as an elective. And we'll have almost 1,000 students now, either in the school year or the summer, pursuing career-ready internships. And I believe I saw this morning over 80% of last summer's host employers said that they would be willing to employ their career-ready intern at their own agency or organization. So that's one example of success. Certainly want to grow, really hard to scale at at much beyond that, but I think it's a really good start. For the industry-recognized credential, I think that the best example we can talk to is the partnership that we do have with the community college and also with OSSI through our early childhood education program of study, which we now have at 4 schools, including 2 of our opportunity academies. And students progress through that sequence of courses. They are doing their practicum in coordination with the community college, and they graduate with their CDA, which is the sort of certification license that you need in order to work in either an early childhood development facility. So I got a 3-year-old, all of his teachers have CDAs. Or what's really exciting is it's also the qualification that is required of within DCPS's pre-K3 and pre-K4 classrooms, that aide position. So we're basically creating an opportunity for students to complete that in tandem with UDC Community College and then get employed right away in one of the many childcare facilities in our city or within DCPS as an aide position. We'd like to see more of that model. It requires a lot of collaboration, and we're taking steps towards that.
Yes, we have been in the foxhole for a while. Just a couple examples. One, when I was at the community college, we spent years trying to get true dual enrollment.
I'm new at this. Can I hold you off for a minute so I can get some questions?
I'm sorry.
And you'll either find the time to answer it or we'll come back.
I would like to first thank you all for coming to share about college and career programs. I am the student representative on the State Board of Education, and I like hearing different programs and different things that people are out here working hard to do for students. I first like to thank Dr. Bibo. I've seen you in my school numerous times, and I continue to see your hard work in ensuring that DCPS students feel college and career ready. My question, although, is for Ms. Kim Ford. In terms of the aspects of graduation, when you talk about the students, well, let me start by saying I appreciate you saying that those are all 3 great requirements, because I do have those requirements. And once I get my diploma, I'll be checking that 3rd one off the list. But in terms of students who feel that college isn't for them, How do you explain your graduation requirement being them having the associate's degree or the college credits?
Right, so thank you for that, and congratulations. So I'm not suggesting that it would be a graduation requirement. Your graduation requirements are your graduation requirements, is the diploma, and we're talking about adding in other things. See, the thing about it is we have this stigma where we say college is not for everyone, and that's, I could give an entire speech on this whole, and I will not. But one of the reasons that you want to actually integrate things like industry recognized credentials, and quite frankly, the credit side, is because it shows students that they are college material. Because what you see with dual enrollment, particularly when you do true dual enrollment and you send the student to the college campus, they take that course, and it doesn't even matter if it's first year seminar, they get that ID, they're sitting in that classroom, they are like, I can do this. That's why it's so important. The thing about the industry recognized credentials is most students are bored with Shakespeare and can't apply that to what they want to do in life, but you drop somebody in a healthcare course where now they're doing, phlebotomy sticks, and they start to see, now I'm really excited about my math and my science because I actually want to do this for my career. So they're actually models that show and prove that when you integrate these things, students are more likely to graduate. That's why the career and technical education students graduate at a much higher rate than traditional students because of these types of interventions. You're gonna let me do it. So, concurrent, when we were at the college, the problem was concurrent enrollment. We never got to a point where it was true dual enrollment between DCPS and the community college, which is bad because that's wasting time for the student. I just would frankly say to push anyone who can push to tell people they have to get over it. I'm sorry, if it's a post-secondary course, that you gotta find a way for it to count for high school. And I just wanna quickly, the way you do your industry recognized credentials and your internships and your work-based learning, look at time. You have to look at time. So that's what you're talking about when these students are going, you look at their schedules and where there is time to send them to do these types of things. And quite frankly, why aren't we using the summer? I'm glad to see that the Marion Barry Summer Youth Program is now funding Earn and Learn programs, which Earn and Learn, one of which is an apprenticeship, right? But there's other ways that you can do Earn and Learn. So let's look at that. And so that student's job that summer is to actually go get a certification in something, or they're going to go work and get that work-based learning skills. So it's possible. These things are possible. And they're easy.
And if people want to talk, raise your hand. You don't have to, and we'll come down. And if people still want to get in after that, we'll go back down.
I taught at Cardozo High School for 40 years, and we started the Trans Tech Academy 25 years ago at Cardozo, which allowed students to do internships during their school years, and guaranteed them jobs with the Federal Aviation, with Department of Transportation, blah, blah, blah. Then we got a construction academy at Cardozo, which gave students, guaranteed students jobs with the big construction companies in the city right after graduation. And they earned those kinds of credits for that in there. So it's very doable. The problem is people in positions of authority don't understand how doable and how important it is. And I really appreciate what y'all have said tonight about that, because it is, when you said Shakespeare, I'm an English teacher, but I wasn't interested in Shakespeare when I was in high school at all. I am now, I always have been. But the thing about it is that students should be put into situations where what they really love to do is valuable to them. And that's what I've heard from y'all, and it's very important.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming to testify tonight. I'll be very brief. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a meeting, and we now have a new dual learning program. The Bar College is coming to Ward 8, 7 and 8, and we're looking forward to that opportunity. So I do also agree that dual learning and deeper learning and social emotional learning are very important products in educating our children in the District of Columbia. And I'm very glad to see that this workforce in front of us is fighting with this workforce here to see that that happens for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you all for coming. I first want to thank Dr. Bibo and Mr. Mitchell for your service on our high school grad recs task force. You talked a little bit about our work over, I guess, the course of 8 months, a little bit today. So thank you for your service. I'll be very quickly. I have 2 questions. The first is for Mr. Mitchell, who's been my teacher and sat on my portfolio panel, so I relish this opportunity. The first question I'll ask both, just so you have as much time as possible. In terms of personalized learning plans, and I'm encouraged about the work that DCPS is about to embark on, one of the things we talked about in our high school grad recs task force was the need for that work to start a lot earlier than high school. Mr. Mitchell, as someone really on the ground who works with students every day from 9th grade through high school graduation, what information would have been helpful in a personalized learning plan or a student profile at the outset of your engagement with a student that would have been helpful as you begin to work with them? And then my second question is for Mr. Long, yes. To Ms. Ford's point about industry certification and about making sure that our students leave high school with employability skills and with the certifications. In terms of building the profile for the student, how much are workforce agencies involved in both creating the planning for these profiles, but also creating pipelines for skills building, but also employment after high school? I'm encouraged that, for instance, our Department of Employment Services is moving under our Deputy Mayor of Education, which I think opens up opportunity for that. But how involved in Virginia were workforce agencies in planning that work?
Yes, Marcus, thank you for that question. I guess this is my portfolio time. There are a number of pieces of information that we get when we receive an incoming high school student. Most of it is mostly data point information, which we can take and kind of discern what their math and reading levels are, and then figure out where they need to be placed in terms of their levels and what supports are needed to be provided. But some of the information that would be extremely useful for us is really the things that we can codify and the things that we can't measure. Who are the student support systems? How does a student really learn? When we get a student that has a specialized learning plan, an IEP or so, there's such detailed information so we know exactly how to support them. But a number of our students are starting us with issues and challenges that are not easily or readily codified in those documents or are not documented. So sometimes you really don't know until later on in the process that a student really has severe family issues. You don't know who are the person's champions or who are their support systems. And when we get to intimate parts of the college applications, talking about financial aid, talking about who's going to take you to college, talking about who's your champion, who's your support, that's when we are learning that most of our children are really running through this process independently and by themselves. So if there's a way that we can figure out and learn earlier on, who are these children's advocates? What does that expanded definition of family mean, right? Because we can work with the numbers. We can work with what their PARCC scores look like from 7th grade. We can work with all of those things. But what we can't work around are the things that the student is not very comfortable sharing with us. And it's tricky because we don't want to border or breach on FERPA laws or anything else like that. But if they are in the district and if they are our students, there are some things that we should learn about them that should be able to transfer over to all high schools, so we know how better to serve our students for the 4 years and how better to secure and provide a safe environment for them to transition onto whatever post-secondary planning, whether it's career, college, employment, or whatever, as we get them in when they come in.
Mr. Long, I just want to acknowledge my time was up, but maybe.
Hello, thank you.
Well, I wanted to thank you and say how much, I deeply value the importance of, to state the obvious, preparing students for, the real world. I guess, what strikes me is, this is sort of maybe responding to your question, Zachary, which is, one of the most amazing programs I have seen, really impressive, that addresses this issue is the Met in Rhode Island. Do you know that? And they sort of flipped this idea on its head of having students do internships in order to prepare them, to augment their academic skills. And really, their academic work is in the service of the internships that they're doing. That is put front and center. And I know that that's not, a model that is practical to think about for DC scaling up. But I guess just that, I'm just putting that out there because one of the other things that I didn't hear mentioned that I think maybe is implicit is just the importance of creating networks for students outside of school. And that's something also that internships does really well. And so I guess I would just, one thing that I would like to see us advocate for more is to make internships more central, actually, and not sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like a fill in for something else, or an extra. So that's just, it's more a comment than a question.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And while I didn't get the shout out, I'm going to acknowledge my constituent, Dr. Bibo. All in good fun here. So I wanted to harness, sort of bring in on the comment that Mr. Mitchell made about social capital building and rich curriculum delivered with rigor and fidelity. And I want to ask anyone who's able to respond to this to do so. I think this point about being delivered with rigor and fidelity seems to me to stand out even amongst with all of the things you've proposed, that all of the ideas are great, but delivering them rigorously and with fidelity for all of our students consistently seems to be something that we have not yet hit on. So what stands in our way? How can we work better on that? Feel free, anyone who wants to respond to that.
Let me briefly say that is the whole challenge in state policy. There are so many good programs in districts and schools that do have very effective implementation, very high student outcomes. And our challenge is how do we sustain and spread that? And I didn't get a chance to talk about this new model, but if you continue with the kind of the vertical model of standards-based reform as really aligning policies for effective implementation for systemic change, that's very important. But add to your capacity, add to your powers, your resourcefulness by this kind of horizontal model, if you will, of using a vision to mobilize educators, workforce development officials, parents, stakeholders on the ground in schools. They can have a richer set of data indicators because they don't have to rely upon or worry about the reliability and validity of high-stakes testing. They can develop their own quality indicators for their schools based on their work-based learning goals, industry credentials, dual enrollment. And that is how you can, as a state board, working on those two parallel tracks, you can help guide this kind of on-the-ground implementation, and a lot of it is peer-to-peer. Find the districts and the schools that are doing it well and have them go to other districts and schools. And also be very flexible to allow for local variation. I know that, Virginia, like all states, district, extraordinary variation in terms of economic prosperity. And they had to really figure out how can they develop accountability systems that allow for the fact that there aren't even jobs, let alone work-based learning opportunities in many areas. So that's the key, is really think about this vision of a profile of student learning and how that can engage citizens on the ground and employers, and that can kind of deal with those problems of ineffective implementation when it's just kind of a top-down systems orientation.
Okay. Thank you. That is my time, but if others have thoughts, I'm open to hearing them or to being followed up with otherwise outside.
So I want to actually follow up on that a little bit, especially with Ms. Bibo. A lot of this was about the very important employability skills, social skills, but I want to talk about the academics, because one of the things that we know in DC, and it has really been brought to the forefront over the last year, is so many high school students are either graduating or not graduating or shouldn't be graduating, we can all discuss that, without the academic skills. And I'm interested in I'll talk in DCPS, how do you think about that? So we've got the high school graduation requirements, and we know, as you said, we have the highest graduation requirements, I think, in the country, 4 years of everything, really. So if students are taking those, but they're so far behind when they're coming into high school, what can you do, what should you do, or what should be happening maybe as kids are passing through elementary school and middle school, so that we're not bringing kids into high school so far behind? I'm sure you've thought about it 100 ways, so.
No, I really appreciate the question. And if I can give you an example of something that we are really on the verge of starting to do about, which I'm really excited, is as a part of, and Representative Williams mentioned, the Bard Early College High School that is coming to the district. We are also opening another new early college academy at Coolidge. That will be in partnership with Trinity Washington University. And one of the things that President McGuire and her leadership team and we at DCPS felt was very important, because behind UDC, Trinity is the sort of number 2 in terms of enrollment, is receiving, second highest number of our students. And President McGuire is very honest in saying, some of them are ready, and here's why we think that, and some of them aren't, and here's why we think that. And so a critical element that we are undertaking together, and which I hope we can scale eventually to include other universities and to include more and more DCPS, both leaders and then teachers, is that we're connecting their faculty with ours to have what I call bridge conversations. So for the faculty at Trinity who are receiving our students, where are they doing well, and what is doing well, and then where are they not meeting sort of expectations, and what does that look like? And then from the high school teacher perspective, what does preparation for college look like? And really just having a dialogue between two teachers, who are really very close to one another in terms of the age groups that they're serving, but that for reasons that I wish were different, folks in the higher education space and folks in the high school space are just not operating in the same world very often. And so how do we break those? How do we break that barrier, and how do we bring them together so we do see less and less of that?
Well, and I'll just say part of it, I think you're right, is communication, but part of it, I imagine most of those high school teachers realize that they haven't brought the students to the level that they want them at. It's not just the communications, it's how to bring the students. So I'm going to also pass on, we can maybe come back, but to think about how you backtrack that. And I know you're talking about the PLPs in the high school levels. I know the high school task force talked about it in middle school and elementary school. Absolutely. So maybe we can backtrack to that. All right, back to Mr. Parker. Does anybody want a second round?
Could Mr. Long just take 30 more seconds on that workforce agency coordination and how that's worked in the structuring of both the planning for the profile, but also creating pipelines for skills building during, but also work after?
Yes, well, the board, when they first started on the profile, it was based on labor market data that showed, I think, about 500,000 jobs in science and technology and healthcare fields in the next 10 years. And that clearly involved the workforce development agencies and employers And so they were at the table from the very beginning, and Virginia is still working very closely on really changing the whole image of career and technology education and workforce development, that these are skills that actually are exemplary of deeper learning and applied learning and socio-emotional learning that every student needs. And so they are working in terms of every district needs to have a profile. They develop their own profile, and in that development, that's when you can bring in the workforce development agencies working across Virginia in networks to share best practices in terms of how do you engage employers in education? How do you bring higher education into this? And so they are very, very important in terms of the ongoing work to really achieve college career civic readiness for every student.
Madam President, can I respond to yours then?
Yes.
Super quick? Okay. This is really the importance of career and technical education. It used to be called vocational education, but career and technical education, not only do CTE students graduate higher percentages, I mean, leaps and bounds higher, but all the studies show that when a student starts in CTE and is behind academically, they catch up and then surpass. And what's important to understand about your own voc ed is that, you know, it wasn't just that we rebranded it, right? You don't roll under the hood of a car with a wrench and fix anything anymore, okay? It is a multi-ton moving computer that you have to read at the 10th grade level to be able to understand the diagnostic. So when we talk about a knowledge-based economy, we're not just talking like, oh, these jobs are rocket scientists. We're talking your career and tech ed jobs. We're saying that those fields are requiring an incredible level of sophistication. So what happens then is when you integrate that, students then see that, ooh, I'm excited about this, I'm good at this, now I'm going to focus more on my reading, my writing, my math, my science. And I really appreciate your comments about it's doable. This stuff is not new. It's not new, it's completely doable, and that's why you say you can do it now. And every study shows that it brings up your academic side.
Yeah.
I know everybody is tired. I see Dr. O'Leary. Let me ask, do you want to say 1 or 2 minutes about the PLPs going backwards, the personalized learning progressions, if you guys have any response on it, and then we'll go to Dr. O'Leary.
Sure. One of the things, and this is actually a really good segue from what Kim just mentioned. Starting in the 9th grade as of this year, so all 9th through 12th grade high school students at DCPS are expected to be supported in a series of grade-appropriate post-secondary planning activities. At 9th grade, that is identifying what are my possibilities. And that's very much driven by what are the high-wage, high-demand career sectors here in the region, what are the skills, what are the competencies, the certifications, the degrees that are required of that. What does that mean? What am I, myself, good at? What are my, doing skills and self sort of interest inventories and honing that. And we're talking about high school students. And so these plans, what they want to do, evolves all the time, and that's fine. Because what I think that students see is that there's a lot of intersectionality in terms of what skills and competencies, and in some cases degrees, are required in very divergent, post-secondary pathways. They will get in the mail, and then there are staff at each school that are supporting them, and that what we are hearing from students, and especially those who are saying that at post-secondary they want to go into a career or an apprenticeship especially, they feel like they're being recognized and acknowledged and validated and supported, and knowing that that's okay. The example that I'll give quickly, if I can, is around our students who are interested in cosmetology. And it's very painful to see a senior realize that she or he has not required the knowledge and skill sets that they need to do something that they believe is their life's passion. And we see it happen all the time, mainly with our young women, but also with our young men who are interested in cosmetology. I don't know that I would have the science and math skills to, right now in my life, to actually go through and complete cosmetology school. And I'm not kidding, it's very intense. And what we are finding is when our youth are learning and making those connections at the 9th grade, the checking out it's just not happening as much. And so we think that that's actually a tool to prevent the things that you, Madam President, are talking about as well.
I want to mention one thing that Mr. Long has in his handout, and it talks about including expanding at-risk funding for high-risk schools and state-level equity dashboard, which I think is something that is going to be a major program in DC Public Schools tomorrow, or maybe not that soon. And I just wondered if, when you have that in there as one of the bullets, is if the collaboration between the District of Columbia and Virginia might be very helpful in implementing these programs about helping high-risk students with at-risk funding, because there's been some problems with it and I just wonder if you give 30 seconds to answer that.
Well, first of all, in the presentation at the very end, in the resources, is the Virginia board recommendations for achieving statewide equity, and it includes a lot more detail on all of that work and on at-risk funding. Yes, that's what I tried to say about the deeper dive into equity. Resource equity at the local level. Education Trust has resource equity data boot camps, and it's drilling down to where you can see the variation in all these different kind of indicators in terms of qualified teachers at the school level. And so when you do that, you can go beyond kind of the higher level view of data, and you unpack it and you involve, again, community stakeholders in going to the local boards and arguing from data. You are not fully providing a good education in these schools because of these different resource disparities. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all so much. We have been delighted to talk to you, and we are now going to turn to administrative business. And
thank you.
Okay, the following items on our consent agenda: the adoption of the 2018 annual report of the State Board, which people have had an opportunity to look at. And a synthesis of the recommendations provided in the State Board's work on teacher and principal retention. Let me just say, as we discussed the synthesis of the recommendations, we're sort of adopting it as a report. We will have subsequent conversation about how to go forward with it. I believe that in adopting the report, we're adopting it. We're saying this is the report. So is everybody good to go with that as the consent agenda? Okay. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, meaning those two things, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. The final item is the revision of our bylaws. Okay, so to begin discussion, and so we looked at these bylaws before. Mr. Parker has a set of amendments. So to begin the discussion, I need a motion on the approval, to approve the revised bylaws, and then we can discuss the bylaws that we saw the other day, and Mr. Parker's.
Madam President, before approving the bylaws, I move that we...
Mr. Parker? We don't have a motion yet.
So moved.
Thank you. Oh, and a second? Second? Thank you.
Proceed.
Yeah, that's all right.
Madam President, I move to amend our bylaws according to Amendment 1, which should be in everyone's packet, that will provide additional clarity and provisions so that there can be more inclusive voices and perspectives moving ahead in our term.
Is this it?
I don't. Does everybody have it?
Looks like this.
Mr. Hayworth, did that require a second?
It does not require a second, excuse me, it does require a second, but I also need to read it after you're done.
Oh, second.
So for members, it's a sheet in your packet that says resolution amendment form. I will read through the amendment unless someone wants to make a motion to waive the reading.
Motion to waive the reading of the amendment.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So now we would move to discussion on the amendment.
Mr. Parker.
Thank you. While we will waive the reading, I will give an overview and then give people time to review the suggested edits. But the gist of it is to ensure several things. One, that there is more, a broader inclusion in setting an agenda, that there is inclusion of outgoing leadership and incoming leadership in stewarding our budget policies, but also agenda, and that there is greater clarity around president or vice president present on committees. And so the language beforehand was that the president shall serve as an ex officio member of all committees. And so you'll see one of the additions is that we would include or the vice president, not being both. One or the other. And so I will pause just to give people time to read, if that works.
I apologize. Mr. Parker, it may actually, I recognize I made a suggestion to waive the reading, and it may actually be helpful if I go ahead and go back through. That way we can discuss each one. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the piece about president or vice president. I've been through these, and I do have a number of questions. And perhaps we could just take the amendments one by one and discuss their impact and desired effect.
So the first section will be in line 68. Insert the words "or designate another member or officer to do so" after the word "superintendent."
And Mr. Parker, could you please enlighten us as to the effect and intent of each of these amendments? I think that would be very helpful.
Certainly. Two things that I was considering with this was that the president may designate the vice president or someone else on the board with the understanding of personal dynamics, personal relationships, or perceived conflicts, giving different working capacities of members of the board, but also understanding that the responsibilities of filling the office of president may need to be further distributed. So if that were to be the case, to allow room for the president to designate that responsibility to either the vice president or some other member of the board. And our current bylaws designated that it must be the president that met with the superintendent.
Thank you.
The second is in line 78. Insert the words "with consent of the board" after the word "or."
And the guidance there is that to ensure that there's board input to inform the president's decision-making power.
Then I think we need to adjust this because, as I read it, the president could still serve on committees or councils that are created or appoint a designee if there's consent. So I don't understand how that would work. I think you'd either say, with consent of the board, would serve or appoint a designee to serve.
So you're suggesting that the president would need to be voted on by the board to serve on a external council?
I'm saying that as written, and I just want to make sure that this is the intent, As written, I understand it to say that the president would serve, or if the board consented, could appoint a designee.
That is right.
That's your
Is right.
intent?
And that the board must consent on who that nominee is.
So can I?
That would seem to me to give the president additional authority rather than to distribute authority, because the president could simply choose to serve.
But under the current rules, the president can name somebody, and there's no conversation about who it will be. So the idea is the president's elected, they might choose to do that, or they might choose to bring somebody else on, but there should be a discussion to do so. That was the intent.
Would it change it if you put it after serve or appoint a designee with consent of the board to the first designee?
That was my question as well, is that if the intent is to ensure that the board had input on any proposed designee, it makes sense as it's written. But if the intent is to distribute the power differently and to allow for consent of the board on whether the president should serve or should appoint someone else to serve, I think it needs to be written differently. So that I think getting at the intent, is the intent to further distribute roles, or is the goal to make sure that the president has input if and when she should decide?
I'm open to either, to be honest. My intent was to say, instead of allowing the president to simply appoint whomever he or she wants, that the board would have to, if the president decided not to serve themselves, that the board would then have to weigh in to approve a designee to serve on an external council or committee. And as I read it, right now it seems that the president single-handedly can decide to serve and single-handedly can appoint whomever he or she wants without board input.
I speak in support of the amendment as currently written. I think the president is both the leader and the official representative of the board. As currently written in our bylaws, has the right to represent the board on external committees or councils. But I do agree with Mr. Parker that if that is going to be another member of the board who is not the leader of the board, that with our consent, that should be possible, but not without.
I guess I would just go back to the first question on the bylaws, the first line that we just spoke about, which I understood the intent of that to be an opportunity to further distribute responsibilities outside the office of the presidency, to allow the president to designate someone else to speak on behalf of the board to the superintendent. And where I'm getting a little lost is that the intent of the first is to further distribute the roles, and the intent of the second is specifically to clarify that the board would want input if the president decided to name someone else. And so why not make both about further distributing the work of the board's leadership?
Dr. Sutter, I would agree with your analysis and your assessment on intent, and that's how I would read the intent as well, as to solidify power within the president rather than to distribute it more widely among board members. And there are a couple of other of these amendments that I feel the same way that we need to talk through. I just want to make sure the only person who's seen this before tonight is Mr. Parker. Is that correct?
That is right. And Mr. Hayward.
And Mr. Hayworth.
Yeah.
Great.
To clarify, Dr. Sutter, so for the previous clause about the interaction with the superintendent, would it fix any confusion or concern if we were to add the clause around being approved by the board for the matter of the superintendent? I guess I'm not clear on.
No, I think, so, Mr. Parker, I think my concern is this. I understood the first one to be about further distributing responsibilities, because currently we have a lot of responsibilities placed upon our president. And that the intent of the first was to say one opportunity to further distribute opportunities is to let somebody else speak in the role of the board to the superintendent as designated by the president. The second piece here, though, seems to sort of shift back, the second modification to the bylaws suggests that instead we're going to ask for the consent of the board if and when the president decides they would prefer not to serve as the representative outside. And that's fine, makes sense, but it seems different in the intent than the first one. So I'm asking sort of a broader question of, is the intent to amend our bylaws about offering more opportunities for more board members to be involved in external relations with the public? Or is there some other intent in general behind the proposed amendments? Because I would be inclined to say, I like this idea of distributing power a little more widely. I understand less if there's mixed intent in these individual changes.
The intent is to ensure that there is greater voice outside of the president as I see it currently. So as I see it currently, the president is set to meet with the superintendent. As I see it currently, the president decides should they decide to serve on an external committee or they single-handedly get to appoint someone. And so the addition of adding in board vote is a check on that to say the board must weigh in if the president decides not to serve on an external committee. Let's say that the council votes on it, says the state board must have a representative, for instance. I think that's something that the board must come to consensus on versus the president being able to single-handedly appoint somebody. And so I guess the question of intent is to ensure that there's greater input and voice of the entire board versus simply the president. And so if it would, last thing I would just say, if it will clarify any confusion, I'm happy to add language around the previous clause with the superintendent. The presumption is, as the bylaws are currently, it is understood that the president is the expected interaction with the state superintendent. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's what the current bylaws say. I think I think the wording that you've proposed for line 68 does meet the intent of allowing the board more voice to, should the president decide to give the board more voice. Does that make sense? And still in this case, it's the president shall decide to speak to the superintendent or shall decide to designate somebody else. So the second line is then similar. The president shall decide to serve on a panel, or the president shall decide to name somebody else. If the president decides to name somebody else, the board should weigh in on who that is. Right?
Can I intervene on two things? One, I think John Paul wants to offer some clarification on one of these. And also, I just want to raise the possibility, since these went out late, people haven't seen them, there's a lot of conversation, that we might want to defer them to a later meeting, and I put that really to Mr. Parker as to whether or not that would be something he would be amenable to, and then people have more time. And
I'd certainly like to continue to discuss this evening. I don't see a reason why we wouldn't keep discussing this, because I think another month of deliberation without understanding intent, I'd like to at least have those conversations, and then if we choose to table it, I think we can table it for a month.
that's fine. I was suggesting that there would be a further conversation about it.
Yes,
Not
I'm
necessarily
happy-
tonight, but
I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Madam President, I apologize. As a technical matter, for the potential amendment for line 78, there are statutes that exist that specifically designate the president of the board as the person who sits or their designee. And so we may run into issues with conflicts between statute and bylaws. And so we may need to ask the advice of OAG on exactly the wording for this particular one.
And just for everyone whose news edification, OAG is... Thank you. And they are
Thank you for
the
that
board's
clarification.
legal counsel, is that correct?
They are our legal advisors, yes.
Thank you.
I'm new to all this. What are we saying? Are we saying, what about, could we do this at the retreat?
I think that was Ruth's proposal.
well, or I would personally like.
I agree with what Jack is saying about, we don't need to wait a month, but we are going to be meeting.
Other than our student representatives, we've got, I think all board members are here. I don't know that all.
Not
Pardon? Never mind. Then, never mind.
By no means do I think we should take hours on this, but I am happy to at least do a read-through and answer high-level questions. If we cannot reach resolution, I think maybe we should punt it to a retreat. But I think we might be able to get through it in a reasonable amount of time.
I'm just looking around. My suggestion would be to continue for a bit and talk it out so that people understand what we're doing, and then punt it. I would hate to punt it to a retreat, which I hope will be really about the issues and the priorities, but we could punt it to the working session, I think, and then vote on it. That would be my recommendation. People would have a chance to sort of further talk about it after tonight.
As a matter of clarification, the next potential vote would be in the February public meeting.
But we could further talk about it at the working meeting, correct?
So the next potential amendment would be in lines 225 and 226, delete the words "or approved by a committee or task force of the state board."
Again, in the spirit of ensuring that there are as many voices considered as possible, it is my understanding that the board operates with committees at varying levels and degrees. But should there be a committee, I would be concerned if a committee vote would directly then imply that something would be voted on at a public meeting without all board member input. And so this just simply says that all board members, well, it strikes that language so that all board members would be able to weigh in on something at a working session before it would then go to a public meeting.
So I have a question for our new president regarding committees and task forces. As we've had these conversations over the last couple of weeks regarding empowering members and making sure that we are full and transparent, one of your suggestions, and I think something that you committed to, and I don't, if I'm going farther than I should, please pull me back, was that any board member who wanted to serve on a committee or task force would be able to.
Correct.
So if a board member is able to serve on a committee or task force, I would hope that then that task force's work could come directly to the board without having to go through additional bureaucracy of having to be considered again at a working session.
Well, I would disagree on these grounds because I think there's a distinction between wanting to take the time to be and feeling it's necessary to take the time to be on a task force to work through everything and be part of all those discussions. There may be people who don't choose to do that, either because they're on a different committee or because that's not where they're going to put their time, but I still think that those people ought to have the opportunity to be part of a full discussion of the board at a working meeting to influence it and perhaps to offer amendments and suggestions. I mean, that's if, to go back to last week's discussion, part of the idea is to come up with things that are more consensual. I mean, everything's not going to be, 9 people, but if we want some effort to get there, it will be helpful to have it come up in a working meeting prior.
So my concern with that is then you get a board member who doesn't have all of the knowledge that's been distributed and passed along and read and absorbed by a task force or working group, say at the last minute at a working session. Well, I don't agree with that. When they haven't done all of the work, haven't been informed, they just have a personal opinion that they don't like something, and so they'll object without the context of all of the hard work that our staff and the community members who've served on a board or a task force for us or a committee with us has invested.
Well, I would just say people come to meetings and discussions with perspectives, and they should read the stuff before they come in, but they may have a perspective that wasn't part of the task force, and I think it should be, my own view is it should very much come before the board first, to the full board.
I could interject 2 things. One, in conversation with Mr. Hayward, we discussed that we would likely run into public meeting rules if we were to follow that guideline that every committee would be open to every board member. So I don't think that that's feasible. And if I think you raise a very valid point, Mr. Jacobson. And so I don't know if we can make edits right here on the spot or not. I'm not quite sure how that works, but
I think this will probably be punted, but I think
But I am happy to add back the committee part, because I do think that that is a valid concern, that should a committee work for a year on something, let's say graduation requirements, I too would be concerned if the burden were then on me to bring everyone up to speed in one meeting in order for them to vote intelligibly. So I'm happy I will make a note of that, and then as we punt it, I will work to make sure the language is changed so that we can weigh in on that.
And I'd love to work with you on that.
The next revision is in line 265. Insert the words 3 or more after the word any. And in line 270, a new subparagraph 4 to read recommendations of the Agenda Committee, and reorder the remaining subparagraphs. And in line 280 and 290, add a new subsection J and I under subparagraph 4 to read new business, and reorder the remaining subsections.
Again, the thought here is that as many people should be able to inform our agenda as possible. And while I do not care to play into groups or divisions on the board, I would hate if there were ever a minority perspective on the board that they would not have input into an agenda.
And I appreciate.
So for instance,
That doesn't make sense.
if there's something that you, Ms. Williams, and myself cared about, if we all agreed and voted on it, it would at least be included on the agenda for consideration for the entire board. Yes. Yes.
So, Mr. Parker, my concern with that is that I alone can right now add something to the agenda, and now you're telling me if I want to add something to the agenda, I have to ask Dr. Gasoi and Dr. Sutter to also agree with me. So that actually limits my rights as a minority member, perhaps. Am I reading that correctly? So right now, under the bylaws, I, as
what
Jack
line?
Jacobson, as a board member, can add something to the board. Mm-hmm.
Can I just say something? It's not been my impression that that has been the case, and maybe I just misunderstood. In the conversations that I've had, it was the goal was to make sure that minority perspectives could in fact get on the agenda. If the point is that right now anybody can put anything on the agenda, that it's a rarely used provision, and
Well,
I'm not against continuing with it, I guess is what I want to say.
And I think one of the pieces that might have tripped up board members historically would have been the 7 business day rule piece of it. Not that a board member could offer an agenda item, but that a board member had to offer an agenda item at least 7 business days prior to a meeting. And so I think we should maybe look at this in terms of, does it need to be 7 business days prior, or does it need to be a group of board members rather than an individual board member?
I would keep the time length just for the sake of our office staff, who I would imagine it might get a little out of control should things be able to be included at the last minute.
Also, let me just add one thing here, because I raised it, I think, a week ago, is the idea of having an agenda committee is so that there's an opportunity for those who want to participate in that aspect of the board to sort of really sit down and think through an agenda. It's so, yes, what we're talking about is, yes, anybody could call in, I guess, and say, oh, let's put X on the agenda. But by and large, the idea is that, we're going to have a priorities discussion. We're going to have these schedules of issues that we have talked about. And so the idea would be to think them through somewhat collectively. So again, the point is not to prevent an individual from doing it, but to create an opportunity for people to collectively think about how can we bring this to a board agenda in a way that's going to be impactful.
Can I ask a clarifying question on this? So as I read that line 265 right now, it says that any board member can add an item to the agenda as long as they submit it 7 business days ahead of time. I would be opposed to making it a requirement that a board member had to get a group to add an item to the agenda. I also would wonder about an agenda committee, which is coming up in 270, because if the committees can truly be no more than 4 people, and if it is tradition, if not requirement, I'm not super familiar with our bylaws yet, that the president and vice president already sit on committees, then you're really only getting 2 board members on the agenda committee with the president and vice president. And if we made this 3 board members having to put an agenda, it feels like, again, this is why I asked about the intent in general. If it's an effort to open the doors wider, this would seem to be something that might narrow them, and I would oppose this particular change.
2 things. It was not my understanding that any member at any point could add to the agenda. And then just for clarification, I think the language should be president or vice president. So it should not be on the, and I think the language should include it would be the current leadership and the past president or president emeritus. And so I guess in that sense it would be 2. But if that is seen as restrictive, again, I'm not wedded to it. But the thought was, how can we have greater input on our agendas to ensure that, kind of going back to what we were saying, that we're not spending time on futile topics. I shouldn't say futile, but to ensure that the topics in our agendas are aligning with priorities of external stakeholders that's going to actually move the needle for policy. And I think having a committee that can funnel all of our concerns, wants, desires through what the external world is prioritizing could have helped with that. So that was the spirit behind it.
Can I ask a clarifying question too? So who would be on that committee and how would it be chosen?
So I'm sorry, some of this was translated, so I'm still trying to internalize this document, but the spirit of it would be that it would be current leadership, immediate past leadership, and then the board would weigh in and include others similar to previous provisions on that committee. If that feels too restrictive, again, it's not something I'm wedded to, but it was the hope that we wouldn't spend, again, a year in a committee focusing on something that has no possibility of moving forward, but that this agenda committee would take our priorities as well as concerns, priorities of external parties, and kind of funnel and shape agendas that will help move us towards a policy driving position.
I have a comment, but do you want to ask a follow-up? 2 things. One, part of this might have to do with what we mean by an item, and it might just be that I was that I misunderstood in the past. But if a member wanted to have a panel, as we had tonight, I don't think a member, as it stands now, could call the president or the executive director and say, we want to have a panel on such and such, and it would automatically be included. So for 4 years, I could have done that.
And for efficiency's sake, I would be concerned if it would be that simple just to pull a panel just because one person wants it.
So let me just say, it strikes me, I'm just going to say that I think there's different ideas here circulating, and they would benefit from some conversation. I'll just say my interest is, one, that I want, as I say, I didn't know that one person could do it, but certainly that minority points of view can get a hearing. And the second thing in terms of the agenda committee, to Ms. Suta's point, is to create a conversation about what these agendas should look like. And I'm very open. I mean, when we were sort of thinking about it, when I was sort of talking it out, it was that anybody who wanted to be on it could be on it. We need to talk about this open meetings issue. I'm not sure why, if we have a set time, why we couldn't have it as open meetings. But that's a question to be discussed. So
I think at this point, I'm happy to delay and defer. I just want to make sure that these amendments are informed by what the bylaws actually say, because I think it's very clear in reading line 265 that any board member could add an item to the agenda, and I think somehow there's been a notion developed that that's not the case, and I want to make sure that if we're updating our bylaws on what folks have told other folks. That is different than updating our bylaws based on our own readings of the bylaws and how we interpret them and what we want to achieve at the end of the day.
Very fair, very fair. I think, well, several things. There are many other ideas that were not presented here that I had conversations with a number of people just trying to build consensus, one being around transition and including outgoing leadership with new leadership interfacing with external parties, including the superintendent. And so as a new board member, trying to make sense of some of these bylaws, also understanding that with full confidence in our leadership, I would just want our board to be as inclusive as possible. And so, yeah.
Is there a bylaws committee?
It goes to the administration committee.
I'm sorry?
It's on the administration committee.
Okay.
I'd love to just say, I think in general, I look forward to reading through these more carefully and comparing them with the bylaws and discussing further at our next working session. I am, in general, a person who likes the KISS rule, the keep it simple, and you can substitute in whatever S you like at the end. I used to tell the students it was silly. Let's not overly complicate things that there is a simple, elegant solution to. So for some of these, I thoroughly understand the desire to change it, and I will support it. On others, like if an agenda committee is 4 people, but 2 of them are statutorily the same people, and it feels a little like we're making work where there's plenty of work to be done that we probably don't need to make more work. So that's just my overall statement that's the eye I'll take to this before we speak next. So I'll beat that dead horse over and over again.
I second her emotion.
See, I knew we'd have things to come together on, Dr. O'Leary.
I'd move to table.
Second the motion.
I'd move to table the amendment, and then if that is approved, then I'd move to table the consideration of bylaws.
I second.
All those in favor of tabling the bylaws until our working meeting?
Table the amendment first.
First, we want to table the amendment.
Aye.
Aye.
And now, opposed?
Now I'd move to table the bylaws amendments and our consideration thereof.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Wait, is that it? I packed up.
Do we have to adjourn?
The meeting, you have to.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second? Okay, with no, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Before we do this, I just want to say thanks to everybody. We are speaking for my co-VP, or my VP. We're very excited about this. We're excited to work with every single person on the board and all the people that you represent. So we're looking forward to a great year. Thanks for a great meeting. Okay, now, the ayes have it, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is adjourned at 8:46 p.m.
Got it.
Yeah.